Good evening. Welcome to Savvy Contemporary at Silent Green. It's a pleasure and an honor to have all of you around. The weather kind of always plays a bit of a trick with us. Last time Arjun Appadurai was here, it was snowy. Now it's super rainy. But we're very happy that people find their way to Savvy despite the weather. Yeah, and it's actually quite good to be in here, I must say, and not outside or somewhere else. So thank you for coming. My colleague is Elena Agudio and Bonaventure so Bejeng Ndikung. I'll just say a word of welcome and then pass it on to her. It's really an honor, and I must say, it's very good to know that one can always call some people 5 minutes to 12 and they step in, which is really the case with all the contributors tonight. You know, Arjun, we called basically 5 days ago. Or 1 week ago, Bilgin Ayata a bit earlier, Margarita, Tsomou also like 3 or 4 days ago, and Vassilis as well. Okay, and it's very good to know that you always have this kind of people, and when it's hot and when there's something very important happening, you can always reach out to them, and they're prepared to step in and do something with you. So we're very grateful about that. I'm also very thankful towards the Savvy team that keep this ball rolling. It's impossible to do such a thing with just a handful of people. You need, it seems, at least some 20-something people that make this happen, and we're very grateful. This project stems from an exhibition project we have right now at Savvy Contemporary called Whose Land Have I Eaten Now? And it is an exhibition that tries to reflect on notions of hospitality, probably for obvious reasons, but I would like to kind of sketch a possible point of departure. The first draft of the concept was written 3 years ago, because we felt that there was a change in the way some of us were perceived in this society. But as it happened to be, it wasn't limited to this society as it is now. It was a change that was more or less international, that could be perceived in Cameroon 3 years ago, and even more so today, with the killing of people that happen to be born in a section of the country called the Anglophone part of the country that happen to speak English, a colonial language, and these people are persecuted because of that fact. So one of the first things you encounter when you land in Cameroon is the head of the president, and it says, written on a big poster, "Welcome to the land of hospitality." And it poses the question, how hospitable can that land be if 40,000 of its people have to seek refuge in Nigeria? So it is a global issue we have to think about. We are forced to, whether we like it or not, we have to reflect on this hostility in these concepts of hospitality. The second sketch of the concept came up in December 2017, about then, I think, when Jerusalem was proclaimed capital of Israel. And we had to ask ourselves the question, what about Palestine? What does this mean to the Palestinians? What does this mean to the people that are there? And it made us think about concepts of, or practices of settler colonialism, or the enterprise of settler colonialism. And there's this displacement reaction that happens in these enterprises, which is to say somebody takes upon mostly himself the right to get to a particular place and takes upon the right himself to displace the other. The host becomes the guest in her own land. And that is something we have to think about. So that is the second wave that made us write this concept and push towards doing an exhibition of this nature. The exhibition is divided into, and the project in general is divided into 3 chapters. The first one has to do with this settler colonialism, which is I host, I guess who is the ghost. The second one is forging the bridge from Wir schaffen das to Das Boot ist voll, which is something we all perceived in 2015. And there were a few weeks where I particularly was very much surprised about this extreme generosity. People went to the train stations, they brought goods, bed sheets, and so on and so forth for people that were coming from somewhere and were seeking for greener pastures. And that lasted for about a week or 2, or maybe 3. But that mere fact that Angela Merkel said that Wir schaffen das provoked an extreme, a very high degree of hate within society, which is something one must also look at. And 2 weeks or 3 weeks after that, the statement wasn't any longer Wir schaffen das, it was Das Boot ist voll. The boat is full. We cannot take up more people. And somebody mentioned something, I think it was Anna Yeager this morning, saying that during an interview with somebody around Wedding, they said, in a country as organized as Germany, why couldn't they just make a bit more space in that boat if the boat is full? So it's a matter of organization. But looking at it critically, it is about this repetition of these concepts. It is not the first time that we've heard about Das Boot ist voll. So we wanted to look at that more critically. The third concept is what we would like to call Hostipitality, the commodification of the concept of hospitality. With the example of Cameroon I gave earlier, but the other examples would be like the Airbnb culture and so on and so forth. So not really meaning hospitality, but meaning the sale of it, the commodification of that concept, which has become more important than the act itself. So we were interested in looking at that. And basically we're here today to look at the 4th chapter, which is titled Caressing the Phantom Limb. Also for a very specific reason. And I must say that we at Savvy, we choose to be reactionary. Being reactionary in our context is not negative. We want to be reactionary. We want to be able to, we want to have the luxury to react to what is happening at a specific time, politically, socioculturally, and so on and so forth. What one notices in the context of Germany, for example, is that almost on a yearly basis, and actually it's the spring, when the sun comes out and people are supposed to be in a very good mood, there is almost always every year a discussion about who belongs to Germany. And it takes different shapes and forms, and that's very interesting in my opinion. Once upon a time, it took the shape of Kinder statt Inder, so children instead of Indians. And that was a particular time when Germany needed engineers, where Germany needed people from outside to come into the country to make the country function. And people in the CDU said, no, we need to produce children instead of Indians, Kinder statt Inder. But it has taken different forms in the past. And this year, I was flying in from somewhere, and I read in the Süddeutsche that there is a new ministry we call Heimat Ministerium. Now, it's okay, you can have a Ministry of Home Affairs, why not? But what does this Heimat really mean? And why this rekindling of this concept of the Heimat? That was something that was very interesting for us to look at. Because if Heimat is a concept that actually is inclusive, maybe that's fine. But what became very evident was that the concept of the Heimat wasn't meant to include some of us. A slight anecdote. Just on Sunday, there was a huge protest in Berlin. So, 5,000 people from the AfD went out. And I got up in the morning and I told my son, who's 7 years old, we have to go and protest. And he asked me, but why do I have to do that? It's always too loud in this protest and so on and so forth. I told him, look, we have to do that because these are people that do not consider your father and yourself as part of this society. So we have to do that, despite the noise. And I find that important just as well to come together to reflect on what this Heimat actually means to us. Heimat, a concept that doesn't include me or include you, is not a legitimate concept for me. Heimat, a concept that says Muslims or the Islam doesn't belong to Germany, is not a legitimate concept for me because even, the Grundgesetz, as it says, one shouldn't be classified according to religion. And we choose to call these friends of ours to come together and reflect with us what this Heimat could actually mean. Heta Müller said, Heimat is something you love when you're away, but as soon as you're there, you hate it, or you don't want to have anything to do with it. But what does it mean then, if we are here and are still longing for that Heimat? What is it? What is this kind of deterritorialization that happens? We are in a place, but we feel that the floor is taken off under our feet. So I would like us to come together and think about that today. And the idea is not looking for a solution, but thinking about it. So happy thinking together. Thank you.
No, you were still in my papers. So thank you, Bonaventure. This was pretty long. It was nearly a lecture. Thank you. So I'm going to cut a little bit the introduction that I wanted to do. But before introducing Arjun, I have to, and also the extraordinary constellation of respondents and speakers that accepted our invitation tonight, I would like to thank again Bonaventure, because he always have very inspiring, courageous, and important words and considerations. I want to thank also Denise Reiner, who's the other curator of the exhibition project we have now at the moment in the gallery, and of the invocations that will be happening actually, because you didn't say it, on the 8th, 9th and 10th of June. And also I'd like to thank all the team that made this long night possible. Raisa Gallofre, who is curatorial assistant, of whose line have I lit on now, Cornelia Knoll, who actually accompanied our one and only one Lema Sikot in the management, project management, Antonio Mendes and Lili Simoji for the assistance. But I also have and want to thank to spend a couple of words of thank you for the Auswärtiges Amt, the German Ministry for Foreign Affairs, thanking them for having invited us for the third time after actually two very crazily huge but successful editions that we curated in 2016 and 2017, and who are giving us tonight the possibility and the means to reflect and to debate collectively on the paradox, on the fantasy and the phantom of Heimat, on the dangerous implications of a certain notion of nation-state, contextualizing them in the current political discourse in Germany, in Europe, and even beyond. In the past editions, we have been talking about the importance of unlearning, the importance of decanonizing, but this current situation is urging us to speak up and to sit together and to reflect on the conceptual constructs of Heimat, nation-state, and Vaterland, and to ponder on the past and present of inhospitality. So now, making it short, I want to thank Arjun for honoring us of his presence again for the second time at Savi Contemporary. It was last January 2017, when in collaboration with the Center for Anthropological Research on Museum and Heritage and the Anthropologies of Art Network, he visited and lectured Savi first. On that occasion, he was engaging in a conversation with Bonaventure and anthropologist Jonas Tinius, who was also a dear friend of Savi, and he spoke about the financial crisis of the last few decades, looking at how failure is part of the logic of design and risk in the world of emerging technologies in finance and beyond. Tonight, if I can just also connect to some of his publications that have been inspiring for us. I'd like to refer in particular to his book, The Fear of Small Numbers, which was published as a thoughtful invitation to rethink what violence is in the time of globalization. In this publication, Appadurai was describing how modern national sovereignty always presupposes the idea of some sort of ethnic genius. And as Kwame Anthony Appiah has been writing in one of the prefaces, he was describing how globalization threatens this idea by blurring the lines between us and them, increasing uncertainty about the meanings of national belonging. Again, Appiah is saying, Appadurai suggests that ethnocide is especially likely when a small ethnic minority is seen by a large majority as an obstacle to a pure and untainted national ethnos as well. If the minority were gone, the nation would be complete, hence the fear small of numbers. Tonight, as you can read in big characters, Arjun is addressing the concept of the phantom limb, and especially is entitling his intervention, The Phantom Heimat. A very short biographical introduction, if I may. So Arjun Appadurai is the Goddard Professor in Media, Culture and Communication at the New York University, where he's also Senior Fellow at the Institute for Public Knowledge. He was previously a Senior Advisor for Global Initiative at the New School in New York City, where he also held a Distinguished Professorship at the John Dewey Distinguished Professor in Social Sciences. He serves as Honorary Professor and holds visiting professorship in numerous distinguished institutions, including the Department of European Ethnology at the Humboldt University in Berlin, where he's currently based, in collaboration with our dear friend and supporter, I would say even, Professor Regina Romild. Appadurai is author of seminal texts, including Modernity at Large, Cultural Dimensions of Globalization, The Social Life of Things, Commodities in Cultural Perspective, Fear of Small Numbers, and has been in the forefront of theorizing the relationship between cultural creativity, global economies, and political emergence. Among his latest books are The Future as a Cultural Fact and Banking on Words, The Failure of Language in the Age of Derivative Finance. Sorry, it was too long. Thank you, Arjun, for being with us. We are delighted to have you. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. Yeah. This, no?
No, this one's
For moving it.
yeah.
For moving it this
And I'm here if you need.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm really very honored to be here. This is indeed my second invitation to be part of an event organized by Savi. And I'm delighted that the timing worked so that I could respond to this wonderful chance to be part of a Savi sponsored conversation, which is part of a long set of events. I'm aware of those, have them on my mind, so I thank you for this invitation and all of your team and colleagues and your supporters, some of whom I'm aware of, for keeping you not only alive, but really thriving and active. You're a great inspiration, a great institutional experiment, and a very courageous and creative endeavor in this city, in this country, in Europe at this time. So I'm quite privileged to be able to make this contribution. But because I did not have a lot of time to think about this particular occasion, I'm going to do something in a slightly different format than I normally do, which is to give you a series, not a long series, but a series of arguments or proposals or what I call theses, little ideas, which are not necessarily intimately connected to one another, but each of them, I hope, pertains to the subject, and I hope they have some kind of narrative logic or some kind of sequential logic, and I hope they add up to something worthy of your presence here today, and especially of those who have so kindly agreed to add their own thoughts this evening without being aware of what I'm going to do. But my only excuse is I was not aware of what I was going to do till a few days ago. But it's been very inspiring, I must say. It's been quite a wonderful experience to write something at short notice, but with some substance to it. At least I hope you will agree that there is some substance to it. So let me then begin. So the title is The Phantom Heimat, and I hope you see that it picks up on many of the texts that Xavier has already produced on this topic. So it's working great. So this is thesis 1, and I'm going to spend a few minutes on it, and then I have 7 or 8 of these, nothing very long. So I hope I'll be done well by 40 minutes, maybe less. So because the nation is an entirely imagined agency, it is capable of doing the most unimaginable things. That's thesis 1. So I've been long interested in the role of the imagination in social life, mostly as a source of inspiration, aspiration, and possibility. But the national imagination, or the capacity to imagine in the name of the nation, also has a dark side. It is the source of borders, of surveillance, of rendition, of expulsion, of incarceration, and of genocide. The latest in this saga of the unimaginable is the sequestering, imprisoning, disappearing, and abandonment of children by the immigration authorities in the United States of America, justified even more unimaginably by a perverse discourse of compassion. The shootings of Palestinian protesters by Israeli army snipers across the zone between borders is another recent example. The treatment of the Rohingya by Myanmar and other Asian nations gives a new meaning to the word inhumanity. The catalog of the unimaginable goes on, and yet these unimaginable acts are produced by the most imagined of communities, one which exists only in and through the imagination, and thus supplants earlier religious, political, and familial solidarities. So I'm trying to understand the relationship between the imagined community and its increasingly unimaginable acts. So that takes me to thesis 2. When the phantom limb is the stranger, the migrant, the minor, all politics is the politics of amputation. Many years ago, when contemplating the ethnocidal violence in Sierra Leone and its adjacent countries in West Africa, I used the term political surgery to help me understand the frequency of the amputation of arms, sometimes legs, as well as other wounds inflicted with an eye to damage, disability, and scars. This form of bodily violence stops short of killing so as to leave the scarred body behind, a living victim of sacrifice, a sign and message to others who may be on the wrong political or ethnic side. In these cases, the victims were literally left with phantom limbs, while they were themselves converted into phantoms of national memory, of ethnic poison, and of bodily deficit. Since many of these victims of political surgery were children, the idea of the minor was doubly reinforced, as minorities were infantilized and children were minoritized. I rediscovered in the writing of that earlier essay the powerful ideas of René Girard about violence, boundaries, and sacrifice, and I'm about to turn to those. For now, in relation to this thesis, let me just suggest the thought that the phantom limb of the minority or the migrant is a reminder of the place of the politics of amputation in the imagining of the national body. So now thesis 3, René Girard. It is the sacrifice of the stranger that establishes the sacredness of the community. The national community has to be eternally renewed by violence. René Girard was a literary critic and philosopher who was preoccupied with the continuing importance of Judeo-Christian ideas of sacrifice in our contemporary world. He had two key ideas. One was that humans were driven by mimetic desire, the desire to possess what the other possesses. The second idea was that of the scapegoat, the arbitrary, vulnerable victim whose sacrifice allows the parties in competitive mimesis to seize their violence against one another by directing their violence to a partial outsider. The scapegoat, René Girard's scapegoat, is never a complete outsider. He's a vulnerable and marginal insider. Girard argued that in the modern world, without the structuring power of ancient ritual forms, the scapegoat theory is only applied by us to others whose victims we believe are unfairly chosen, but we never think of our own victims as scapegoats. Migrants, undocumented aliens, and other bio-minorities, a phrase I've recently invented to help me understand the kind of minorities involved, are indeed Girard's scapegoats, but the interesting question is, what mimetic desire do they allow us to resolve by their victimhood? Who is the limb and who is the phantom? I propose today that migrants today awaken rage about the phantom nature of the nation itself. That object of desire that appears to evaporate when faced with global markets, vanishing jobs, rising debt, and austerity economics. Migrants who desire the pleasures of the nation state in the places to which they come arouse the anger of just those citizens for whom the nation state has become a phantom presence. Thus, the migrant has to be humiliated, then sacrificed or expelled. But even after the expulsion, the pain of the phantom limb remains, because the primary desire that motivates it, namely for a nation which is real with a capital R, can never be fulfilled. Migrants remind us that it is nation states, not outsiders, that have become in Mary Douglas's famous phrase, matter out of place. Thus, migrants must be amputated, but the ache they leave is for the nation, once imagined, that now can never be. Takes me to thesis 4. It is widely assumed that nations produce violence through war, repression, and conquest. But an equal truth is that it is violence through which the affect of nationhood is produced. The colonization of global consciousness has convinced many of us that the nation produces violence. This violence is best seen in war, where killing and dying in the name of the nation is routinely sacralized and memorialized. Soldiers, death, war. Thus, those of us who are opposed to the nation form see it as the source of such violence and do not see that it is in and through violence that the sentiment and materiality of the nation is produced, by hysterical battles against neighbors, by the hunting and hounding of strangers, by the genocide of minorities, by the persecution of insurgent religiosities, and by the mobilization of armies that are taught to worship the national flag, national borders, and national soil. Thus, violence and the nation state are co-productive and require an endless dialectic of mutual renewal. In this dialectic, the phantom limb of the foreigner serves to disguise the phantom body of the Heimat. This is also why the migrant in our midst also has an always uncanny quality, seeming both too close and yet too far, desiring what we desire and claiming what we claim, but fleeing from or expelled by one phantom Heimat to knock on the barbed gates of another. This is the unheimlich maneuver through which the nation persuades its citizens to deny Heimat to the stranger. We can also see this effect in the extraordinary ways in which lucky migrants can become citizens. Thesis 5. Today's migrants had to perform heroic feats which inaugurate what we may call the age of acrobatic belonging. So the Spider-Man of Paris is the most recent and powerful exemplar of this form of belonging, which brings together elements of the Hunger Games with others from the TV show The Survivor and movies like Man on a Ledge, of which there are hundreds. Images of the stormy ocean, the vertical building, the trapeze, the circus, and the gladiatorial ring now mark the visual spectacle of the migrant in Europe. In other words, migrants now have to perform precarity in order to deserve hospitality. The fascination in Europe and the US, and in some other places in the world, with the precarious acrobatics of migrants like Mamadou Gassama is that they complicate the idea of bread and circuses into a new logic of address to the migrant. If you want our bread, give us a circus. And this is not the simple utilitarian logic of those sitting in comfortable seats. It is from a world of European citizens who are themselves living in different forms of austerity, with jobs, homes, pensions, and healthcare becoming increasingly precarious for many people from Britain to Greece. So it is important to find more than an arbitrary scapegoat. Not anyone will do. We need someone who is simultaneously heroic and vulnerable to perform the precarity at the heart of the Heimat while also projecting it onto black and brown bodies. But simple precarity will not do. It has to be heroic precarity. For no other sort of precarity will fit the narcissistic needs of the Heimat. The acrobatic migrant, risking death in oceans, tunnels, borders, tall buildings, and airless trucks, performs the heroism of the soldier, the patriot, the commando, acting in the service of the nation. The migrant who risks death in the effort to save a true citizen, is the best Samaritan of all, for he has nothing to lose and everything to gain. Unlike the soldier, the fireman, or the ambulance worker, he is unpaid and thus not in the realm of bureaucracy and civil society. He is in the realm of the sublime, of the athletic, the religious, and the poetic, all of which are qualities the Heimat no longer possesses. The limb that performs precarity, therefore, can and will be saved from amputation. So, hospitality. We cannot forget Le Grand Jacques. So, Derrida's idea of the gift contains the same impossibility as his idea of the hostility in hospitality. The hostility in hospitality that Bonaventure just referred to. So in both cases, Derrida points to an impossibility, the impossibility of the pure gift and the impossibility of pure hospitality. But what is the source of these impossibilities? For Derrida, the gift can never avoid the demand for return. Hence, there can be no pure gift. But the hostility of the host towards the guest is more puzzling. Here, I'm going to offer you a quotation, I'm going to read it, from a review by a Dutch scholar, Martin Stronks, who summarizes Derrida's position on the impossibility of hospitality. And I offer this summary because Derrida on hospitality is spread across 15 or 20 years of his writings. It's in many places. It's not something easy to extract. So I rely on someone else who could do infinitely a better job than I. So I'm reading now from this Dutch scholar who is trying to give you the essence of what Derrida has to say on hostility and hospitality. Here it goes. The difference between the unconditional hospitality and the rights and duties as conditions for hospitality does not necessarily lead to a paralyzed desire for hospitality or an abolishment of the demand for hospitality. Both forms of hospitality are, however, indissociable. One calls forth, involves, or prescribes the other. This is a direct quote from Derrida. The law of hospitality requires, which is for him capital L, the law of hospitality requires unconditional welcome and orders that the borders be open to each and every one. But to invite someone to your home presupposes a kind of sovereignty over this home. To be a host is precisely to maintain some mastery over your place, which obviously contradicts the unconditional welcome that the law, he gets this from Kant, so the law says you must welcome everybody, anytime. But on the other hand, you welcome them because you have mastery, you have sovereignty. So that for him is the core problem, for Derrida, that is. In this uncertain and undetermined terrain, back to the Dutch scholar summarizing Derrida, host and guest meet, negotiating the reciprocal identities that shape hospitable encounters. This implies that the experience of hospitality is structurally impossible, but it is this very impossibility which enables certain forms of hospitality. This is, of course, typically a Derrida kind of inversionary twist. Hospitality is a self-contradictory concept. It deconstructs itself precisely in being put into practice. It never exists as such. It is always to come. This opposition between the unconditioned ideal and the conditioned reality does not, however, lead to some sort of nihilism or despair. This is still the person talking about Derrida now. It stands at the threshold of what is, and while encountering what is to come, it maintains some elements while deliberately leaving other elements aside. Or in the words of another Derrida student and scholar, quotes, "Yet this law of hospitality must continue to be thought as a magnetism to the question, the of the laws of hospitality," close quotes. It is this equivocal character of hospitality, the tension between the unconditional welcome and the conditional laws of hospitality, which Derrida brings to the fore. This quotation, now finished, which I read out to you, now I resume my own voice, opens up a question for me. If we are not convinced by the tension that Derrida sets up between absolute and conditional hospitality, on the ground that the Kantian argument for unconditional hospitality is flawed, I believe it's flawed, because it sets up an abstraction, a kind of universalism, which Derrida constantly goes to. With the gift, with hospitality, there's always an absolute, and then there's the world as it is. And if you don't buy that, then you're on a different train than Derrida is. But on the grounds of the Kantian argument for unconditional hospitality is flawed, where else can we seek the hostility inherent in hospitality? Derrida sees the source of the impossibility of hospitality in the mastery of the host over his home, which he must compromise when he extends his hospitality to his guest. But if the sovereignty of the host over the Heimat, as I'm saying, is already spectral, then the hostility to the guest has another source, which is, and this is my argument, that the guest exposes the artifact, the artifice of the nation, the foundation of the Heimat. Hence, it is always dangerous, unstable, and unwelcome. That is, the guest is unwelcome because he exposes that instability, not because of tension between absolute and realistic hospitality. So, we have two more, 7 and 8. So the source of the impossibility of hospitality is the tension between the phantom stability of the Heimat and the unshakable precarity of the migrant. The spectacle of the precarious migrant, related to the recent Paris acrobatics, etc., endangers the host body of the Heimat, bringing liquidity, formlessness, vulnerability into the nation, threatening to turn the phantom limb into the phantom Heimat. Guests, strangers, and migrants expose the precarity of the nation, its fabricated kinship, its ersatz solidarities, its derivative sacrifices, and the artificiality of all its limbs. The central tension is the vital precarity of the migrant, which, once allowed to enter the body of the host, activates the precarity of the nation. The nation form is precarious, furthermore, in two distinct senses. The first is the precarity of a form of imagined community, going back to imagined and unimaginable, a form of imagined community that established its stability by suppressing, repressing, and marginalizing all the forms of Heimat that preceded it, above all those that we today call regional or local. So, Brittany, Provence, Bavaria, Maharashtra in India, the southern part of Cameroon, the northern part, it's endless. All these had to be crushed, marginalized, and suppressed for Germany, Cameroon, India, France, Pakistan. The list is complete to emerge. There is no nation that has emerged without that kind of suppression of other or preceding Heimats. So, the nation form, I say, is precarious in two distinct senses. The first is the precarity of a form of imagined community that established its stability by suppressing, repressing, and marginalizing all the forms of Heimat that preceded it, above all of those that we today call regional or local, which become no more than figments and fragments once the nation achieves domination. So, this fragment is Brittany, that fragment is Bavaria, this fragment is this. But who made them fragments and figments? This other large imagined entity. So the original precarity of the nation always threatens its stability, for the voices of the suppressed never disappear. These suppressed voices, life forms, languages, territories, are also phantom limbs, which the nation state caresses, also a phrase from my friends at Savvy, through museumization and commemoration, while denying their claims to any form of sovereignty. This is the founding precarity of the nation form. The second precarity and this is very important that there are two precarities at play, comes in our present era of globalization where market, climate, disease, and other forces have decisively established the precarity of the nation as transnational and planetary forces that the nation can neither contain nor regulate. Migrants threaten the stability of the nation by exposing both these forms of precarity, the old form, the inherent form, and the current form. Borders and migrants are a theater on which the stability of the nation has to be once again established in the face of its always recurrent precarity. Last thesis. The migrant challenges us to imagine a Heimat often for the future, a home for hope and for possibility. So I took note of the materials you sent, that this is not only about saying what is wrong with the restrictive idea of Heimat, which does not seem like big news, although I hope I've said a few things about that which are not exactly the same things that we all know and always say, but we have to ask, so what and now what? So is Heimat owned by the wrong side forever and ever? So very briefly to say, perhaps not. It might seem that the Heimat is doomed to be exclusionary, violent, and inhospitable, but the acrobatic, precarious, heroic body of the migrant points also to another possibility for how to imagine a Heimat which is not primarily about roots, origins, sources, or memories, and points rather to the future. A future of possibilities, horizons, anticipations, dreams, and hopes. In short, a Heimat of the future and for the future. The migrant body is a body of hope, a body of possibility, and its precarity is the historically precarious body of the Heimat, but is not the historically precarious body of the Heimat, but the precarity of risk, anticipation, and possibility. Put very briefly, you might say, it is the precarity of some form of hope. The figure of the migrant attracts the rage and hatred of the right-wing populist sensibility because it threatens the past-based precarity of the exclusive Heimat with the future-based precarity of a more fluid, open, and negotiated Heimat, where belonging is the sharing of precarious futures rather than the sharing of a stable past. This vision of a future-based Heimat is hard to accept for many because it makes membership a contingent, negotiated, and political reality based on shared aspirations and not a fixed, closed, and eternal fact based on blood, birth, or soil. This futurity is both the promise and the threat of the most important guest of our time, the unexpected migrant. The threat is not to the Heimat as such, but to the Heimat, which is the phantom limb of the nation and calls for constant amputation. For without amputation, we cannot have phantom limbs. And without phantom limbs, we might have to face the phantom quality of the romantic idea of the Heimat itself and open ourselves to the truly uncanny possibility of a Heimat based on shared futures rather than to shared pasts.
Thank you very much, Arjun. This is really inspiring, but we are continuing to discuss later because after your presentation, we've been inviting 3 people to respond to your lecture. The first one is Bilgin Ayata. The second one will be Vassilis Tsianos. And the first one is Margarita Tsomou. So now I'm inviting Bilgin to come to Yes, to give a shorter lecture that is also a response to Arjun's presentation. I want to introduce you briefly. First of all, I also want to say that because we always want to keep very long relation term dialogues with the people we're inviting, Bilgin was already at Savi in 2015, 14, 15, yes. When we were commemorating the 130 years of the Berlin Congo Conference with the project Wir sind alle Berliner. And yes, in that moment we understood that we had to continue engaging in a discussion with you. So I briefly read your biography so that everybody is aware of your research and your work. Bilgin Ayata is professor of political sociology at the Department of Social Sciences at the University of Basel. Previously, she taught at the Freie Universität in Berlin. She obtained her PhD in political science at Johns Hopkins University and MA degree from York University. Her research interests encompass migration, conflict, memory, affective politics, and post-colonial studies. Her regional expertise includes MENA, which stands for Middle East and North Africa, and Europe, but in particular Turkey, Kurdistan, and post-colonial Germany. She has published on transnational movements, the politics of displacement, affects and politics, genocide denial, memory regimes, and EU migration policy. She is an associate member of the research cluster Affective Society at the Freie Universität, with an ongoing research project on the affective dynamics of urban protest and political transformation in the Middle East. So, of course, for us it was inevitable to invite her to respond and to Arjun and to address the topic of the phantom limb and the Heimat. Thank you. No, this is still with the HDMI?
Yeah. Oh, can you go to the front so that it's not seen really? That would be nice. No,
Why it says
I don't know. Can we close that? No, wait.
no, it was already good.
No. That's really yeah.
No, but you couldn't see it there.
Okay, good. Now it's good. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you, Elena, for this lovely introduction. Thank you, Elena, Bonaventure, Anna, for the team of Savvy. As Elena said, I was here already, not here, at ICI, at the event of Savvy, where, talking about Heimat, clearly Savvy is one of those places where you can feel very much at home. I don't know why it took them 4 years to invite me again, but I'm happy to be here, of course, at this very important occasion, in particular, of course, to offer also some reflections on the topics that Arjun just addressed, but also, of course, of the larger topic, sorry, like this, on Heimat and caressing the phantom limb. So what I would like to do is to speak a little bit more concretely on this very, admittedly German, term of the Heimat. I was a little bit surprised when I got the invitation and saw, that Heimat, made it into the, English announcement of Savvy, and I thought, well, this is quite interesting that we transport Heimat into the English language also now as a political term. It has been, of course, been done that before. As you may know, that Heimat is a very particular term that doesn't really find an exact translation into the English language. This is why we use Heimat now when we speak, right? So it could be home, it can be place, it can be belonging. It has a very wide range, and actually, if you really look into the scholarship that has been engaging with the history and the etymology of Heimat, you see that it has been really a very vague term. It's very conducive right, to import into this term a lot of things. I'd like to address a couple of those things, and some of them have been already addressed by Arjun, but I think in some parts I would also maybe diverge with that. So let me begin with a short personal anecdote on this, because I think it illustrates this complication of Heimat quite nicely. When I was 8 years old, or 9, I received as a birthday gift a poesie album. Some of those of you who grew up in Germany, you know, probably invoke some memories about that. It's not very I don't know if it's very popular outside of Germany, but it's around that age of 7, 8, or 9. Girls get these cute notebooks, right, where each page is decorated with flowers and butterflies, right, that you take to school, and then your, you know, classmates write some sentences in it or put some pictures, and you give it to your family and friends, etc. It's an older German tradition also. So I was very proud of my poesy album and treated it with great care. And at that year, in my class, in my school, we got a new teacher, a substitute teacher, whom I had liked very, very much. And she was a young, warm, and gentle woman. And after giving the poesy album to different classmates, I handed solemnly the poesy album also to her, asking if she could also write a short poem, an aphorisma, you know, or do something to insert in that book. This is something that is usually done. So she agreed, of course, and the next day she happily gave me the book back. And when I opened the page with excitement, I found this aphorisma that I had already read before in other people's poesy albums, but I was really struck that she chose this one to write into my Poesiealbum. Vergesse nie die Heimat, wo deine Wiege stand, denn in der Ferne findest du kein zweites Heimatland. So this is a very popular known aphorisma. I cannot translate this in this rhyming way into English, but it pretty much means never forget the Heimat where your cradle was located, because far away you will not find a second one, right? So Heimat is there where you were born. Now, I remember that I was really puzzled, and I tried to figure out, so what does she really mean by that? I mean, I was born in Ulm, I mean, in Germany. She knew that. So my cradle was there. So did she wanted to say that Germany, where I was born, was my Heimat, and it was a useless effort of my parents to drag us, you know, each summer to Turkey to visit some relatives and, you know, try to maintain some affective bonds with their place of birth? I mean, you know, could be that she says, you know, don't, you know, maybe she wanted to prepare for later times, you know, a couple of decades later when there will be a ministry of Heimat, so, you know, you shouldn't forget that actually, don't worry, no matter, you know, what kind of weird discussions happen, your cradle, you know, was in Germany, so this is why I wrote that, right? Who knows? She could, of course, also insinuated that Germany, where I was born, was not my Heimat, but instead that I should not kid myself with continuing German traditions of the Poesie album, and Germany is not my Heimat, so, right? So because I liked her and I wanted to keep my idea of her intact, I made a conscious decision that she must have meant the former interpretation, that her motivation was to actually include me as an Ausländerkind, right, to the notion of Heimat by writing this aphorisma. So while I made that decision, I was very much, you know, I had ambivalences, because deep down inside, I kind of guessed that this was not really what the intention was of this poem. I was at that time the only, you know, non-German kid in that, visibly non-German kid in that regard, and I still decided to accept this poem as something, an inclusive act of her. Now, basically this meant that my sense of belonging, or in order to protect my sense of Heimat and my sense of belonging and my love for this teacher, I had to maintain the act of suppression and denial. Now, while I could keep indeed my relationship to this teacher intact, the term Heimat certainly lost at this moment its innocence for good. For some years later, in the 1990s, when I was studying, as like many other visible minorities in Germany, I tried I too struggled at the political level to make Heimat a more inclusive concept, to expand the boundaries of what belonging could and should mean in Germany, and of course demanded my equal entitlement to this very Heimat, right? Maybe in the vein of how Arjun just had suggested. But honestly, today, I have no more an interest in making this very Heimat more plural, to democratize it, to make it more inclusive, to make it more plural. I don't really think anymore that there's a point of denazifying it, to decolonize it, to desexualize it, to queer it, and so forth, so that progressives and leftists can disarm the Kampfbegriff of the right wing and rescue the term for a greater good in the future. I have to say that I don't see that there is a greater good in that term, period. But by saying that, I don't want to suggest at all that we should not think and not debate about belonging, about the sense of feeling at home, about place, about affective bonds and attachments. Of course not. In fact, I want to suggest that we should talk much more about emotions and affects in politics and society, that we do have to speak about the affective contracts that underline societies and communities. We need to understand the desires of and for the state, but please not by keeping this German term Heimat, alive. I want to just explain in the remainder why I mean this, and I think for this it is important to go back a little bit and revisit the emergence of this term and to look at how it became so popular, right? Because it's so in the media right now, but it is important to actually see how it came to this point. So this is a graph from the digital dictionary of the German language. It records the frequency of the use of terms per million words. And as you can see, the term Heimat enters the public realm around, in the 18th century, but it's actually in the 19th century when Heimat becomes really popular, reaching a peak between 1880 and 89, 130 years of 1884, right? And remains a high level throughout the 20th and 21st century. Currently increasing again since 2020. This is from the last 50 years. So most scholars working on the emergence of the concept of the German idea of Heimat list usually, let me go back, the occupation by Napoleon as a triggering point of the sense of, increased sense, heightened sense of Heimat. But more importantly, of course, we know it is structural transformations through the expansion of state bureaucracy, as Arjun also had pointed out to, industrialization, urbanization, that make Heimat an important reference point. The contemporary use of Heimat usually conflates it with nationalism, but the term itself actually emerged in opposition to the nation state, in opposition to the centralization of the state, and to the introduction of national standards to social rights, as it happened in the reform of the Heimatrecht, and the predecessor to this citizenship in 1871 and 1894. The local had to give away to the national level so that the Heimat as an economic and political unit was no longer valid. Before industrialization and the centralization of the state, the term Heimat referred basically to a home, to a family home, a property and the place of birth, situated in the sedentary setting, which serves, of course, also as a spatial designation of home. Yet with the changing Heimatrecht laws, with the rural to urban migration, with the building of factories, the Heimat becomes relegated to a memory space of the pre-industrial past. Etymologically, Heimat derives from Ham, that linguistically also forms the root for Hemd, the shirt, and Heim, the home, and Himmel, the sky, right? So you can see that in all of these derivations, that the notion of Heimat was much more closer connected to the notion of protection rather than belonging. And it's only over time that it becomes a term that, which provides a sense of ontological security in the increasing alienation and individualization of modern times. When the state then emerges as the coldest of all cold monsters, as Nietzsche said, Heimat becomes the affective container for an enchanted nostalgia for times free of conflict, which of course, right, reflects the phantasma of white male property owners and not those excluded from entitlement, such as women, not landowners, and the moving workers. As various scholars have pointed out, the term Heimat is, of course, very gendered and sexualized. Until the 19th century, in the German use of it, Heimat is referred as das Heimat, and it's only after the mid-19th century that Heimat becomes feminine and becomes die Heimat. Heimat thus then symbolizes the longing to unify with nature and functions to serve as an affective compensation of the loss of innocence expressed in locating Heimat into childhood memories, right? This is something where when you ask what is Heimat, right, it comes back to childhood memories. So basically, to sum it up, Heimat in German thought and history configures as the affective bond between the local and national, but also gets revived as a counterbalance whenever deep shifts in the self-definition of Germany as a nation takes place. One important moment of that was, of course, in Enlightenment, and during the time of Enlightenment, a point that one of the critical scholars on the Heimat, Peter Blickle, highlights very much in his analysis, on his critical theory on Heimat. German romanticists were opposing the subjugation of the German spirit to the critical autonomous subject, which put the capacity to reflect and critique oneself into the core of, Western conceived Eurocentric subjectivity. Self-awareness, the ability to distance oneself from oneself, and to be able to reflect on objects and subjects at the same time are at this very heart of this kind of white male subjectivity. Thus, Heimat is often rejected in the literature as an irrational reaction to Enlightenment, but Blickle offers a more refined argument. He argues that, quote, securing one's sense of Heimat is a way for the ego to have a sense of oneself without needing to be aware of it, and so the solitude of the individual in the world is nullified. So in other words, Heimat is a space free of self-criticism and conflict, and maybe this is exactly what it makes so attractive both yesterday and today. I find this analysis very important, but I want to end with two critiques which I find insufficient in this explanation, and hopefully, offer some further discussion with those critiques. So my first critique of the discussions on Heimat, the scholarly discussions on Heimat that exist, relates to the fact that most critical studies in on the emergence of the term Heimat in German thought follow the outdated antagonism of emotion versus reason, right? Or rationality versus irrationality. As we know by now through the affective turn in the social sciences, this has been fundamentally questioned, the core juxtaposition of ration and irrationality that lies on the idea of Western political subjectivity needs to be criticized and revisited and through the lens of affect and emotions. As Elena already mentioned in the introduction, I'm also part of a larger research group at the FU Berlin called the Affective Societies Research Group that involves over 70 scholars who are researching how we can rethink the notions of belonging, society, and politics by actually taking emotions and affect seriously. This is important because in the same way how secularization did not, prevent our laws, rules, political orders to be, cleansed from religion, it would be in the same way highly problematic to assume that states are cold bureaucracies in which emotions have no place. Such an assumption relegates emotions to the realm of Heimat and the nation by neglecting the affective politics of the state and administration. Some of them have already, picked up on that. What I'm suggesting is instead to extend the lens of affective politics not just to the discourse of Heimat and nation, but to the very analysis of state power and the state apparatus itself. We need to interrogate the desires, the affective economies, and the affective regimes that allow the term Heimat to resonate so strongly throughout the last centuries in this prominence, both among the right and the left, right? So my second critique relates still to the ongoing neglect of the relationship of Heimat and colonialism, even within the critical scholarship on Heimat. For instance, Peter Blickler, who I had before cited, the leading author on the critique of the term Heimat, is able to say in his book the following with regard to the German bourgeoisie's enchantment with Heimat. Quote, Heimat is a kind of toothless German critique of modern Western civilization. Now, we already heard why this cannot be the case by Arjun, but obviously you can formulate such a sentence only if you completely ignore the importance that Heimat has in relation to colonialism. Heimat served not only as the affective bond between the local and national, as I stated before, but it equally served as the affective bond between Germany and the colonies. There's both an internal dimension to Heimat as well as an external one, which unfortunately many scholars ignore. In a few important studies, however, we can see how Heimat was indeed a very flexible and dynamic term that could, for instance, affectionately describe the Kilimanjaro as the highest of all German mountains and extend the notion of Heimat systematically to German colonies. Here, it is quite interesting to see, the function of nature or the position of nature in this, which is a key reference point in the Heimat discourse, how this comes to aid. While the colonized subjects were dehumanized, exoticized, and their alterity emphasized, the depictions of nature in German colonial magazines focused much more on similarity, not on difference. A study by Jens Jäger, who has examined the depictions in both school books of the times when there was still Kolonialkunde, and still there's Heimatkunde, right, as we know, in some Länder. He also analyzed some colonial magazines, such as the magazine, as you see here, Kolonie und Heimat, right, Colony and Heimat, and it is quite interesting, right, to see how the colonial project is made legible for the German audience, how the trope of Heimat becomes exactly the core medium, right, for this legibility. So, as you can see, this is just an example. This is a depiction of the city of Ratzeburg at Drei Linden, right? It's a very, standard depiction of German landscape of Heimat, right? And then, here you have Dar es Salaam in Deutsch-Ostafrika, right? It's a picture also taken from the magazine Kolonie und Heimat, right? And if you compare those two, you see already in the aesthetic composition, right, how the similarities are much more emphasized rather than contrasting in its difference. This is, for instance, again, an image of the Kilimanjaro, right, back then, termed as the highest German mountain, where, again, pictures were chosen where the similarities were highlighted much more than the differences. So obviously, Heimat can be dynamically expanded, right? It is not so regressive as we may think in that regard, or not so static as we may think. So this expansion of the term of Heimat to the colonies also entailed a new temporal component for the concept of Heimat, while the use of Heimat within German or the German Reich entailed a passive component of a Heimat that is always already there, right? It's the place of birth, it's always already there. It's located in the past and in the memory space. The employment of Heimat in the colonies had a future focus in relation, of course, to more colonial settlements and to build new Heimats for Germans elsewhere. So just to end on this notion, the relation of Heimat and colonialism, thus, has very important implications, I would argue, for our present discussions. If indeed Heimat has always an internal and external dimension, and if we take history serious, then we should now ask not only what is the internal dimension, what makes the term, Heimat so popular in domestic political discourses in Germany, but of course we should also ask what is the external component of this, right? What is beyond debating Islam and the anxieties and the AfD entailed in this discussion of Heimat. And of course, I would argue that the external dimension of this debate is related to the renewed and uninhibited involvement of Germany, once again, in Africa. The contemporary form of this involvement is not securing territory, but securing borders, which, as we know, has led now to an ever-expansion of the European frontiers to the African continent. The highest increasing budget item of the next EU budget plan for 2021-2027 is the column Migration and Border Control, which actually grows 160%. As we know, in October 2016, the German Chancellor had stated quite prominently that the well-being of Africa is in the interest of Germany. It's interesting to think again about this term in the context of the previous depictions. Here, of course, Germany aligns with France and Italy who try to increase the influence on the African continent via EU policies and bilateral agreements on border and migration control. So this is also why I have trouble by regarding a European identity and a European Union as an antidote, a possible antidote to Heimat and nationalism. The emergence of the EU is as intimately connected to colonialism as the expansion of Heimat to the colonies. And sadly, today, we have to see that the EU border regime kills more migrants than the AfD. That's so horrible to say, but it's actually true, right? I mean, that's, you see here in this picture the image of Mavda Sharvi, a 2-year-old Kurdish girl who was trying with her parents to enter Belgium with her parents from Iraq, and she was shot on the 18th of May 2018 by Belgian police who were combating illegal migration in Belgium. Of course, that the EU border regime kills more migrants than the right-wing movements currently is not new. It has been doing so since 1990s. So because of that, maybe we not only need to interrogate Heimat, we need to interrogate freedom, a freedom that rests on the livelihood of others, the freedom that is promised through the European Union. In conclusion, I'd like just to emphasize that it's not the problem of Heimat being a provincial notion so that cosmopolitanism or citizenship could be the answer. In the larger trajectory of things, the difference of Heimatrecht, Staatsbürgerrecht, or Weltbürgertum is just a matter of scale. All of these concepts, they protect and violate, they include and exclude, they provide and extract. It is this tension inherent to the politics of belonging that has become the motor of change for so many societies that cannot but respond to the struggles of the excluded, the disempowered, and the disenfranchised. In that way, I'd like to say, let's take out the 30,000 skulls, the bones, the treasures, the artifacts that are stored in the basements of the ethnological museums in Germany and archive exactly there, all these film rolls of the Heimatfilme and other, artifacts of the term Heimat until they get dusty. Let's de-Heimatize belonging and seek to remain grenzenlos and unverschämt, as Mai Aim had famously called in her poem on German Heimat. Let's not get distracted by countering Heimat, finding nicer, more plural versions of it. In that vein, I would follow Toni Morrison, who argued so powerfully with regard to race that instead of focusing on this distraction, let's focus on power and greed, and let's de-Heimatize belonging. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bilgin. Yes, after unlearning, decanonizing, now, yes, it's really important to maybe use this word de-Heimatizing. Now it's the turn of Vassilis. I'd like to yes, welcome you here with a translator because Vassilis is going to, yes, talk. No, you're going to speak a little bit in German and then later in English as well, I think. And exactly, it's good also to disrupt a little bit the format. Thank you for sitting on the chairs. So Vassilis Tsianos is a professor and teaches sociology at Keele University of Applied Sciences and is a member of the Migration Council. His work focuses on the sociology of post-migrant society, racism, and the European border. What? Ah, yes, we need to put the image.
This one or which one?
It was here. Noch nicht. Okay,
Aber
später.
von den Computern machen.
So just to continue while you are doing a couple of other things. We invited, again, quite last minute, Vassilis, not only because we understood he would be perfect to answer to Arjun and also Bilgin, but also because we read on the 24th of May a very interesting article that he published on the Süddeutsche Zeitung, sorry, but I'm confused by the movements here, under the title Grenzlos, where he has been retracing a history of the German legislation 20 years ago, the closing of the Asylkompromiss, and he also stressed the importance of finding a European strategy instead of only facing global migration from a national unilateral perspective. So, Vassilis, I'm giving you 10-15 minutes, translation included. Okay. And then we continue with the discussion. There is a lot to say also after. Thank you.
Also es ist für mich eine sehr große Ehre, hier und heute zu sein, aus unterschiedlichen Gründen. Eins, es hat mit der Einladung zu tun und mit den Xavi-Leuten, die ich sehr schätze und verehre. Und der zweite Grund hat selbstverständlich mit dem großen Meister Appadurai. Das ist für mich eine sehr große Freude und Ehre, hier in versuchen zu kommentieren. Leider, und da benutzt... willst du was sagen? Ah, das heißt alles, okay. Leider habe ich die Hälfte des Vortrags verpasst, aufgrund der Deutschen Bahn. In Hamburg hatten wir sogar eine Evakuierungssituation im Hauptbahnhof. Okay, es reicht jetzt mit den Anekdoten, aber jetzt werde ich weiterhin mit anderen Anekdoten fortsetzen.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to think that I'm very honored and privileged to be here today for different reasons. First has to do with the invitation by Sevi, who is a team of people that I very much appreciate, and second has to do with the master Appadurai, who I will try to comment on. Unfortunately, I have missed half of his speech because of Deutsche Bahn, and we were even evacuated in Hamburg, I think.
Okay. Selbstverständlich, seitdem mich Elena angerufen hat, habe ich mich permanent mit der Frage beschäftigt, wie kann ich ein Narrativ entwickeln, was der Master adäquat wäre. Vor allem angesichts der Tatsache, dass ich noch nicht die Möglichkeit hatte, seinen Vortrag rechtzeitig zu haben. Also, ich habe mich selbstverständlich wieder mit seiner Arbeit beschäftigt und mit seinem grundlegenden Werk Modernity at Large, wo wir eigentlich mit einer Zeitdiagnostik so in den späten 90er Jahren zu tun hatten, die mich damals und nach wie vor inspiriert hatte.
So since I've received this invitation, I have pondered how I could respond to the master's narrative, Appadurai, especially because I haven't had his speech beforehand. So I have studied his work, and I've realized that we face a kind of diagnostics of time which has very much to do with the late 90s, which has inspired me a lot to ponder about.
Der Master Appadurai, sorry, das ist kein Witz, das ist Respekt. initiierte in den Sozialwissenschaften und nicht nur eine Debatte, die wir mit der Figur des Postkolonialen, aber vor allem mit einer nicht exakt, aber sehr überzeugend akzentuierten Kategorie der Deterritorialisierung, die dann in der Figur der Ethnospace imstande war, in meinen Augen das Verhältnis von Lokalität und Deterritorialisierung, Lokalität und Globalisierung auf den Punkt zu bringen. Und das ist der Punkt, was meiner Meinung nach auch heute unter veränderten Verhältnissen auch diskutiert wird, wenn wir mit der Renaissance des Völkischen, mit der Renaissance des Heimatlichen, mit der Renaissance der weißen Supremacy in Deutschland zu tun haben.
So first, when I say Master Appadurai, this is not a joke, this is a sign of respect. And I think that Appadurai has started a debate in social sciences which revolves around the figure of the post-colonial character, which has very much to do, which forms an ethnospace, which has very much to do with deterritorialization, and it summarizes the relationship between the local and the deterritorialized, as well as the global and the local. And I think today that when we see this resurfacing and renaissance of the talk about nationality, about ethnicity, about belonging to a certain people, and the renaissance of white supremacy, this has very much to do with this figure.
Damit beende ich den ersten von zwei Aspekten, die ich heute erwähnen werde. Appadurai, interessanterweise, lieferte schon in meinen Augen die kürzeste, prägnanteste Form dessen, was man oder Frau eine freundliche Heimat, eine Heimat des Kommenden, eine kommende Heimat, eine wahrscheinlich nicht heimatliche im deutschen Sinne Heimat. Und die ist meiner Meinung nach die folgende. Ich widme mein Buch meinem Sohn Alok, mein Zuhause in der Welt. Ja, so ein Verständnis von Heimat als Zuhause in der Welt, im Angesicht des anderen, kann ich als Heimat selbstverständlich in irgendeiner Weise verstehen. Alle anderen Diskurse, die Heimat in Bezug auf Genealogien der Macht, auf Genealogien von Weißsein und auf Genealogien der idealen Identifikation von Stadt und Wohnbevölkerung, von Staatlichkeit und Wohnbevölkerung, sind eigentlich Narrationen des National-Sozialen, mit dem wir gerade zu tun haben.
So Appadurai delivers the shortest version of what I would call a friendly home, which is a home in the becoming, a coming home, a home of the coming, not so much what Heimat is associated with in German. And this shortest definition is the following, which is a pretext. I dedicate this to my son Alok, my home in the world. This for me is the perfect definition of home, because all other discourses that revolve around the genealogy of power, of whiteness, of an ideal identification, narratives of National Socialism. National-Social.
Und jetzt komme ich bin fast fertig. Also Kat, zweiter Punkt. Ich habe mich die ganze Zeit beschäftigt, wie kann ich sozusagen, was kann ich eigentlich Besseres als das Verhältnis, als die Arbeit, die schon geleistet worden ist in der Dekonstruktion des nationalen Kontexts der Globalisierung. Und es gab Folgendes. Wir sind in Hamburg. Und ich denke darüber nach, wie ich heute sprechen und kommentieren werde. Heimat, Heimat, Heimat. Ich hasse selbstverständlich dieses Wort in jeder Ausdrucks- und Akzentuierungsweise. Ich bin also in der Hamburger Sparkasse Und ich bin im Begriff, meinen Kontoauszug zu holen. Wenn man nicht genug konzentriert ist, die Hamburger Apparate werfen die Kontoauszüge sogar etwas offensiv. Es ist wichtig, weil es eine Pointe ist in der Geschichte. Auf jeden Fall.
Yes. So I'm coming to the second aspect tonight, which is I've been pondering all the time, how can I talk better or else about the deconstruction of the national idea in the context of globalization as it has already been done. So I'm in Hamburg, so I have asked myself, how can I talk about Heimat? And taken for granted, I hate the word Heimat in any possible way that it can be pronounced or associated with. So the anecdote is that I'm in the Sparkasse, in the local branch of the bank in Hamburg, and I'm trying to get my bank account papers, and the machines throw them out.
Währenddessen hinter mir befinden sich zwei Personen, die ich eindeutig als weiße Deutsche identifiziert habe. Und die haben Stress. Der eine ist ein wirklicher Wikinger, groß, arisch, imposant, jung, ein bisschen subproletarisch. Der andere hinter ihm, also Saxis, arisch, also eine andere Form vom arisch sein. Also auf jeden Fall etwas betagt und etwas kleiner und älter, wie gesagt. Und die haben Stress und ich irgendwie beobachte sie, während ich gleichzeitig im Begriff bin, mit diesem Stress der Kontoauszüge klar zu werden. Auf jeden Fall, irgendwann merke ich, es geht um einen Konflikt und es geht um das übliche Konflikt, was man hat, oder Frau, und es betrifft sozusagen die Zonen der Intimität. Wie nah kann man sein beim Bankautomat? Und plötzlich höre ich, du hast mich geduzt. Nein, Sie haben mich geduzt. Wie kommen Sie überhaupt, Sie mich zu duzen? Ich immer noch die Personen als weiße Deutsche, Mehrheitsdeutsche interpretierend.
Okay, so I'm standing in the branch, busy with trying to get my accounts, my statements, and there are two people behind me which I clearly identify as white Germans. And they're having some kind of trouble and stress with each other. And one is a kind of a Viking type, very tall, large, impressive stature, young guy, chap. The other one is a bit older, smaller, also white, wax white, I think you said. And they're having some kind of conflict and trouble, which has to do with how much space you keep in the line. In the branch and how much intimacy you give the other person, and suddenly they talk about that the one person has talked to the other in you as the young person has talked to the other person with the you, the informal. The old person has talked to the other person with the informal you in German and not the formal version of you that you would use for a stranger.
Exakt. Und es gibt eine kleine Steigerung. Ich beobachte es gleichzeitig. Ich bin im Begriff schon, meine Kontoauszüge aus den Händen zu verlieren. Auf jeden Fall, weil, wie gesagt, großer Wikinger, kleiner Sachse. Und dann höre ich einen anderen Satz und das macht etwas anderes aus der ganzen Situation, die ich mit euch teilen will. Sie dürfen mich nicht duzen. Wie kommen Sie auf die Idee, mich zu duzen? Nehmen Sie doch, wie kommen Sie auf die Idee, mich zu duzen? Und dann kommt die Antwort. Ach, hört doch auf. Ich kann reden, wie ich will in meiner Heimat. Und dann habe ich gesagt, okay, this is something else.
So I'm there already kind of losing my statements because I'm so nervous, and I observe another thing happening in the dynamic, which is the big Viking and the small Saxon having this trouble, and then there is the sentence where the person says, how do you dare talk to me in this informal way? And the other person responds, stop it, I am allowed to talk the way I want in my homeland.
Also, erst dann sind sozusagen meine antirassistischen Instinkte aktiviert und dann war ich selbstverständlich ein bisschen anders aufmerksam. Und dann stellte ich dem älteren Sachsen die Frage vor, Sie haben Heimat gesagt? Und er, total durcheinander, Sie haben Heimat gesagt, habe ich gesagt. Sie meinen, diese Filiale ist Ihre Heimat. Und dann gab es eine kleine andere Eskalation, die nicht wichtig zu erzählen ist. Auf jeden Fall, gleichzeitig bin ich im Begriff, die Kontoauszüge zu sammeln, weil ich war durcheinander. Auf jeden Fall, ich verlasse dann die heimatliche Filiale und hinter mir kommt der Wikinger. Und dann, und selbstverständlich reden wir miteinander, wir duzen uns, das war klar. Und er hat mir gesagt, sag mal, bist du Grieche? Und ich habe gesagt, ja, klar. Und du? Ich bin Kroate. Dann gab es eine großartige balkanische Fraternisierung. Auf jeden Fall, es ging selbstverständlich. Für mich ist es ein exemplarischer Fall für die Grenzen, nicht der Narration des Heimatlichen, für die Grenzen des Heimatlichen und entlang von Whiteness, entlang von White-Sein. Es ist mir bis zum Moment, das ist auch meine Heimat. Und bis zum Moment, ich kann so sprechen, wie ich will in meiner Heimat, betrachte ich diese Situation als ein germanischer Konflikt. Okay, zweiter und letzter Akt.
So whilst I'm still there and observing this dynamic, I'm turning to the older Saxon who has said, I can talk as I want in my homeland, and I'm saying to him, you just said home, Heimat, homeland. And the person looks puzzled at me, and I say, you said homeland. So this bank branch is your homeland? And then I'm picking up my statements and I'm leaving, and the big Viking is leaving with me, and of course we're saying the informal you to each other, and we're talking, and then the Viking asks me, tell me, are you a Greek? And I say, yeah, of course. And you? Well, I'm a Croatian person. I'm a Croatian. So we have this fraternalization around this situation, and this mention of homeland evoked my anti-racist instinct, because this conversation was an exemplary case of how the definition of home or homeland goes along the lines of whiteness.
Und jetzt, und das ist der letzte Punkt, bitte das Bild. Und jetzt werden wir uns mit einer sehr prekären Form und in der sowohl akrobatische als auch singuläre Momente der prekären Migration existieren. Kann ich das haben? Kann ich nicht. Ja. Okay, das ist vielleicht nicht eine akrobatische Prekarität, aber sicherlich eine heroische Prekarität der Migration. Mit was für einem Bild haben wir zu tun? Wir haben gerade vor ein paar Tagen einen sehr traurigen Termin erinnert. Ja. 25 Jahre Zöllinger Mord an 6 Personen oder 5 oder 6 Personen. Eine der Überlebenden, die Großmutter der Überlebenden, ist die Bilgin, keine Ahnung, Zenk, eine 75-jährige Frau. Sie hat 2 Töchter und 3 Enkelkinder oder umgekehrt, verloren. Und im Solingen wurde dann eigentlich zum ersten Mal in dieser Form als Staatsakt der Erinnerungspolitik in Deutschland erinnert. Wir haben mit zwei Aspekten, was die Grenze der Heimat und des Heimatlichen, was für mich des Völkischen gerade darstellt. Der erste ist die Art und Weise, wie die AfD dieses Bild kommentiert hat. Die AfD, im Namen seines stellvertretenden parlamentarischen Sprechers, hat Folgendes gesagt. Hast du es? Das ist, mit diesem Bild können wir die Vorstellung von Integration von Frau Merkel verstehen. 45 Jahre lang kein Deutsch und Kopftuch. Das ist das Verständnis von AfD, was die Erinnerungskultur einer neuen Heimat der neuen Deutschen betrifft.
Okay, darf ich kurz? So with this image, I want to talk about precarious migration from two different aspects. One is kind of acrobatic, the other is heroic. This one obviously is the heroic one. This picture is about something that happened 25 years ago in Solingen in Germany, which was an arson attack murder in which 5 people died. This woman to the left of Chancellor Merkel is Merlinse, who lost 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters and 1 niece in the attack. And this commemoration of 25 years was for the first time on a state level where state representatives partook in the commemoration. And I want to talk about 2 aspects relating to that image. The first is how the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, has used this picture to say that this would be an example of the Merkel integration policy exemplified by a woman who has been in Germany for 45 years, hardly speaks any German and wears a headscarf.
Wenn wir aber diese Händebewegung oder Begegnung betrachten und wir können uns vorstellen, dass unsere Kanzlerin nicht Initiative unternommen hat, dies zu tun, aber auf jeden Fall sehr gern offensichtlich mitgemacht hat. Wir können beobachten, was das wie Formen im Grunde genommen, nicht von neuen Heimaten, aber von neuen Zukunften im Kontext der Migration aussehen werden. Nämlich indem die Frau Bejeng, oder wie sie heißt, sorry, ich kann das nicht aussprechen, sie hat bewusst die Hand der Kanzlerin genommen und sie hat sie bewusst in den Saal geführt. Und sie hat das so lange gehalten, bis die Kanzlerin da war. Diese Form von sozusagen Intimität zwischen Ungleichen liefern Bilder, Gefühle und Narrationen möglicher gemeinsamer Zukünfte, die vielleicht ein Zuhause mit einem Zuhause in der Art von Master Appadurai in Verbindung gebracht werden kann. Vielen Dank.
So the second aspect that we should pay attention to is the movement and the posture of the hands of Merkel and Merlinse, which surely Merkel did not initiate, but at least she partook in this gesture. And this gesture speaks of new futures, because we can see that Merlinse consciously takes the hand of the Chancellor and leads her into the room, which is a kind of intimacy between unequal persons. So this speaks of both feelings and narration of possible joint futures to come. Thank you.
Is it working? Oh, yes. So this is a long night of ideas, so don't think you're going to be released in a few minutes. There is a third respondent now, Margarita. You also want to sit on the chairs? Very good. I introduce you briefly because we are a little bit late on our schedule. So Margarita Tsomou is a Greek author, publicist, dramaturg, and curator. She publishes the pop feminist Missy magazine and writes for German newspapers and radio, among others, as a permanent author and co-host on the Greek program of RBB Eliniko Rantevu. As part of her work, she cooperated with institutions such as HAO, Abelamhofer, House of Work Culture, Gorky Theatre, Goethe Institute Athens, Onassis Cultural Foundation. She wrote her doctoral thesis on the crisis of representation during the financial crisis in Greece since 2010, and she belongs to the publishing collective B Books and the artistic activist group Schwabingrad Ballet, right? We invited her because she's actually in the process of organizing and curating in August 2018, if I'm not wrong, a conference titled Heimat Fantasien, Fantasies about Heimat, about the renaissance of the concept of nation and Heimat. The conference is going to be launched at Kampnagel in Hamburg, right? Yes, I leave you the floor.
Good. Hello.
Maybe it's better if you use this one, so we avoid.
So I'm already very tired and hot, and I guess you're the same. So I will try to be as lively as possible. And the invitation that I always enjoy when I have from Savi. Last time I was here, I was talking about Greece between the West and the rest, trying to think of the Greek debt crisis alongside all the history of debt crisis in the global South. Never thought that I should sit here and talk about Heimat 2 years later or 1 year later already. I'm very honored to be here with the other speakers, and I will try to make a real response. With some thoughts of mine, my paper here is full of notes, and we will see what comes out. Also, it was a short time invitation, but it was also a blind date. So no one of us knew what the other one was going to say. So this is now, and I will try to make it short, a blind date, spontaneous try of response. So, I would like to start, or for me, the most important and striking issue concerning Heimat is the fact that the National Ministry of Interior was renamed into Heimatsministerium. For me, this is the most important issue because I see here, at least semantically or symbolically, but I think of importance, the concepts of Heimat and nation merged together and folded together. And I think this is an especially dangerous merge. We heard before, Bilgin said very nice, the idyllic dimension of Heimat. Also today it is something like a fantasy of a place where someone belongs, a fantasy where a place that someone feels safe, bound to childhood memories, that gives me Geborgenheit, Vertrautheit, so I feel safe and at home, familiar, and also it's a space where I'm not a stranger because it's my authentic origin, right? Let's say Heimat is that. And the nation, we heard Arjun was saying, is also an imaginative community, a construction of equals and more sameness of people of different subjectivities as being sameness, but is also concretized and materialized in laws of inclusion and exclusion. And I think these two terms, nation and Heimat, since they're both constructed, they're very, very easy to use for projections, for political narratives. And this is what I found so dangerous about them. So if we try now, and this is what I was trying to think in the last period, if we try now to understand the Heimatministerium, a national interior, a national ministry that becomes Heimat, right? On the one side, we see that Heimat becomes a national territorium. It's not anymore, as Bilgin said, you said, an opposition to the nation state, but becomes the nation state. Heimat is not only a local thing or a utopic to come, but is a nation state with borders and laws of inclusion and exclusion. And on the other hand, the nation becomes heimatlich, becomes Heimat, meaning the nation becomes a concept of authenticity and of origin. And that brings me to the question, what does this actually imply? Does it not imply that whoever is not deeply rooted authentically from this place here is actually not only not part of Heimat, but maybe also not part of nation? We saw it in the Heimatministerium image. I didn't bring it with me. You know the image where all the ministries were presented. They were all authentic Germans. This was for me the symbol. So citizenship, as we had it, that is actually a vessel, or is actually bound to democratic rights, that is granting not sameness, but equality. We're all equals towards the law. As citizens, we all have the right to vote if we have a German passport. I don't have a German passport, but if you have a German passport, you have the right to vote, even if you have a migration background, and even if you're of color, etc., etc. We're all equals, right? But I think when this nation, this citizenship is bounded to Heimat, then nation is against ethnicized and racialized. And this is what we saw in this image, right? You're a Heimatministerium, you belong to Heimat if you're white, German, male, heterosexual. Right? And if you're not that, you might not belong to Heimat. You're not represented in this Heimat National Ministerium. And the new thing for me is that you not only not belong to Heimat, but you might also not belong to nation. You don't belong in the realm, in the responsibility of the Ministry of Interior. No one would say that, of course, right? Still, the Ministry of Interior is also responsible for me. But this is the semantics, and this is, I think, how we should understand Seehofer's sentence, the Islam gehört nicht zu Deutschland. The Islam does not belong to Germany. Because the Heimatministerium, because the nation becomes Heimat, and in Heimat, the Islam has not a place, right? As Bilgin said, and I think, by the way, this is an amputation. And this is an amputation, as you said, an amputation that is, why? Because it's so violent. You have like second, third generation migration in Germany. And it is, it's a violent thing to people that actually belong as citizens, to make them not belonging to the nation as Heimat, right? Heimat is a more exclusive, even, I think, concept than the nation. I would even say it's a purity thing. You know, the National Socialists talked about the nation as a pure thing. And then we have the migrant as an infection, and the migrant that has to be cleansed, not only amputed, but cleansed, as Dreck, yeah. So what Bilgin said about the nature, I think it's super interesting. With the nature in Germany, Heimat is very bound to nature. So Heimat at the moment is not only a natural territory, but a national natural territory of the countryside, right? Heimat is the countryside, as Bilgin said, is something like a contrast to industrialization, an idealized thing where you long for the natural ideal, right? So Heimat, in the semantic associations, is kind of a retreat from the urban everyday. If you want, is a retreat from the hardships of reality, because we live in urbanity, and also is a retreat to the past. So at the moment, I see Heimat as a projection foil for a promise of a once imagined functioning and predictable world before the hardships of mobility, flexibility, before migrant movements, before global governance. So it's also a retreat to the countryside and a retreat to the past. So I think if we identify nation and Heimat, as the Heimat Ministerium dangerously does, the national community is united by a regressive illusion of the past as the memory of an intact homeland, Heimat. And you can see this nature thing very well if you look, for example, at the Bavarian website, touristic website, where they advertise Bavaria, right? The slogan, I didn't bring it with me, the slogan is "Welcome to Heimat." It's not "Willkommen to Heimat," it's "Welcome to Heimat," right? So you see, if the tourists look at this website, it's not his Heimat, right? How can it actually, but it is, Bavaria is Heimat. The iconography, of course, of the German Heimat is Bavarian mountains, oak trees, Lederhosen, nice little rivers, and is actually, as Bilgin is said, or to say before, this is the iconography. And then I realized, yes, Bavaria is not one Heimat of anyone, but is the Heimat. There is no more heimatlich thing than Heimat. So Heimat in this sense is not even a biographical experience or a singular experience, but is a motive of a universal Bavaria, right? And you could see it in Bilgin images, where these images, independently of where you were, you had to imagine is everywhere is Bavaria. We also don't, like, rarely we see Heimat as, you know, my Heimat is Berlin because there's Berghain, you know? One could say Heimat, Berghain, you know? One could say all kinds of things. But actually, I think there is a universal, a Bavarian universalism in the Heimat. And this is why also Seehofer has it and no one else. Good. The last thing about the nature, before I go shortly to gender and leave you in peace, is the interconnection of this idea of Heimat connected to nature that implies for me a very essentialist notion, of course, right? Because if Heimat is fueled with the concept of nature, and nature is the medium of Heimat, right? We talk about natural signifiers. Heimat has natural signifiers, mountains, etc., meaning Heimat has fixed signifiers. Fixed signifiers that are not negotiable, as you said, right? But it is a Heimat where one cannot familiarize with these signifiers if your origin is not there. So if you're not originally natural born Heimat, you cannot integrate in this, right? How can you integrate in something that is natural, original? It's not possible for a migration society to be bound to the signifiers. So this is, I think, this natural signifiers is also what makes Heimat so exclusive, and also what shows us the immediate structural essentialism and racism in the imagination of nation as Heimat. And for me, Heimat also reinforces a tendency that we see also concerning the thinking of the nation more and more today. So nation promises to unite different subjects in a territory, inside a territory, towards an outside of territory. Normally, nationalism is a nationalism that addresses an outside as its counterpart. Right? But I think that today, nation as Heimat does not only divide the inside of the nation to the outside of the other nation, but shifts the division of sameness and otherness into an inner border. So more and more, when we talk about nation, we don't talk about one nation against the other nation, but we talk about nation as an inner division between us. as someone belonging to a nation living here and someone not belonging to a nation living here. So the national we at the moment is not everyone, you know, the united imagined community of we, but is a half we. Is only a half we of those who have Germany as a Heimat and not only as a nation. So I think this is super important to understand that nationalist discourses divide inside the Heimat now and not outside only of the Heimat, although we had it with the Greek crisis. I could comment on Arjun, but I try not to be too long. Yeah, because, and I think as you said actually, it's very difficult to identify with something that is fluid. You try, right, people want to identify with something that is identical to themselves, that's something that is fixed. If we talk about a society that is fluid, negotiable, etc., apparently super difficult to identify with these kind of mobile subject. Last thing, gender. Just think about the image of the Heimatministerium again. We saw this white Germans, and they were all males. There was no woman among them. There was a scandal about it. Also the Heimatministerium tells us Heimat is male, which reminds us, of course, of the birth of the nation, which was always a male. The first thinkers of the nation never thought of nation and citizenship also belonging to women, right? This had to be fought for afterwards. Which reminds us, if you were talking about the violent nation, the defender of this violent nation and the protector is always male, right? Is the soldier. Is what Klaus Teweleit talks, that the core of the nation is the male, because this is who can defend it, right? So Klaus Teweleit, for example, says that there is no wonder and no coincidence that feminists were talking about male chauvinism that resonates with national chauvinism, because female chauvinism would be a contradiction in itself, right? That does not mean that the women have no role in the nation, of course. They have, and they had also in colonialism and a big role. And this is what we see also today. The woman in the nation is the mother, is the role of the mother. The woman in the nation is reproducing the protector, the defender of the nation, and the producing what the AfD calls the Keimzelle der Nation, the nucleus of the nation. So the role of the woman is the reproduction. We see this in all the recent right-wing extremist women's movement who are anti-feminists movement. So this kind of role of the national woman is an anti-feminist woman who swears to nation and to Heimat, against abortion rights, against reproductive rights, against female emancipation. And the woman of the nation and of the Heimat is, of course, a racist woman, is a woman that works for white supremacy, for the supremacy of the white males over the migrant, the of color, the refugee males, right? So, two words on a way out. I think it would be, I would never ever want to save the term Heimat. I don't think it's savable and reappropriable, like Van Bellen was doing in Austria, who was trying to save the word Heimat and say this can be an inclusive we, but the iconography was against these mountains, etc. Didn't work out. For me, it's interesting, and maybe we can do this into a discussion, to talk about municipalist politics as we see them in Spain, where you have a complete other way of thinking and practicing localism, or as you see it in the democratic confederalism of Rojava, who is a democratic stateless and still localist way of referring to a territory or a homeland. So far, thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. So we have 10 minutes break. Yes, you can have 10 minutes break, but then you're always, I mean, especially you, Vassilis, you're not gonna leave, then you're gonna come back, and we're sitting for a moderated discussion, we're taking questions, and we have music afterwards, music by Njamy Sitson to, yes, continue hospitality and conviviality as well.
I think it's time to continue. So please take your seats. I'm sorry to disturb you guys. So thank you very much once more for the brilliant presentations. A lot to chew, and it was obvious that it wasn't meant to be a coming together for just harmony. So it was obvious that there was supposed to be some disharmony and dissonances. So we're very happy about that. So we can have something to talk about now. If not, it would have been boring. Thank you so much. We will open up to people to ask questions. But we'll take the privilege of being the host to ask one or two questions before passing on the microphone to the audience. And I will, because we are an art space and we have to think from that space of the art, I would like to pose a question that is maybe kind of related to what Bilgin was talking about, leaving the Heimat and looking ahead, taking distance from that. In the year 2000, Hans Hacke did a piece at the Bundestag, which was called Der Bevölkerung. And I think that's a seminal piece. It's a very important one, at least, on the reflections of the usage of the word folk. That's folk. Which is, as the Heimat is, also a very problematic concept and, word in itself. The question at the time was, this piece was commissioned, and he said, I do not want to use the word folk because it's extremely charged, because of the similar history you pointed out, because it's been also constantly appropriated and misused by all kinds of people that have power. So he said, instead of talking about das Volk, let's talk about die Bevölkerung. Der Volker. The Bevölkerung. Now, last year when we did the documenta, Hans Hacke did another piece, which was titled, Wir alle sind das Volk. So to say, 17 years thereafter, he realizes, or I would say he kind of contradicts himself, saying, no, we cannot leave the concept of the folk in the hands of those people, because words are only words. You have to give them new meaning. You have to, So he says, we are all part of the folk. We are all this folk, which is an interesting twist. So now the question is, what does it then mean to leave the concept of the Heimat in the hands of those people that continue to give it a certain meaning? So with all due respect to a concept of deheimatizing, is deheimatizing a redefining of Heimat, or is it giving Heimat even to, making Heimat even more dangerous by putting it in the hands of those that would feed it with the most disdainful meanings, So, and what does that mean in effect to us that, because there is, of course, also a very clear personal, because does it matter how much you choose to leave it away if you are attacked on the street the next day because you do not belong to this Heimat? So what does it then mean? So this is like a first question I have, which I would like all of us to think about, at the possibilities of giving meanings to words, and concepts. That is one. If I may, I would ask another question at some point. Thank you.
Would you like us to possibly respond? Yes, or you want to open?
No, I
there's a mic that we are sharing. I think before I respond or try to, it would be only right to thank again, but now from having listened to them, my colleagues here, for really saying some very important, illuminating, and thoughtful things about the idea of Heimat, but also of nation. And I take away a lot of things. I'm looking forward to the written texts or whatever text may issue, because I know there were a lot of nuances. But I take away one big thing, which is that there is a tension between Heimat and nation. And that tension is historical, it's linguistic, it's conceptual, it's political. And we want to, our debate or discussion, maybe with others here, would be how do we enter into that possible kind of aporia between the two, as opposed to assuming that the two are very friendly to each other, and which someone like me tends to do because I'm not a German speaker, I just know the word in the most general way. So this is a word of thanks to all my colleagues here, but, and it's also the issue that is reflected in Bonaventure's question now, which is, what do we do? I mean, one big question indeed is, do we try to make the idea a subject of contest, or do we remove ourselves because the idea is truly corrupt? And I can think of other ideas which one truly must abandon because they are corrupt to the core. They are evil by definition, and they've been evil from beginning to end. Heimat, I wonder, I mean, I'm not an expert either in German language or history, but I wonder if it has enough affinity with some yearning that people have that it cannot be tossed out. Because it will turn up with some other word. If you drop Heimat, you may succeed, but the affect may not be so easy to remove. I mean, I totally agree that one should not create the opposition between the nation as a procedural space, a space of protocols, bureaucracy, rules, regulations, and Heimat as the space. That's a brilliant and very important thing. Still, whatever is meant when people invoke Heimat, my feeling has to be engaged. But here's, I'll respond to the question, to Bonaventura's question, and maybe that could be also interesting to my colleagues here, which is what part of our politics has to be somehow linguistic in nature? In other words, recognize that there are words carry weight, they move people when they are uttered in a certain way, they are performatives, as Austin would say, or they are kind of complex ways of troubling gender categories, as Judith Butler would say. In other words, language has weight. So which things one moves away from in the linguistic sphere and which not, and which movements away from words in play are politically wise things, because sticking to those words draws you into that thought space, and which are the ones where you have to say, you have to contest it, because you will contest the idea anyway at some point, even if the word changes, as one of my old teachers would say about other words, but I will apply it to Heimat. It may not be Heimat tomorrow, it might be Scheimat, but it will be more or less the same thing. So it will come up. Anyway, that's my thought. It's a question, really. How important is our key words and their ability to mobilize going to be part of our politics, and how important is it, on the other hand, to reject certain semantic worlds in order to produce other possibilities? And I'm really open on this, but I think it's a very vital question. So I'll pause there.
Thank you. I think it's, of course, it's a question that preceded my call for deheimatize, because this is something that is very often brought up, right? What do we do? So the example that you mentioned, I didn't know, sorry for the ignorance, but it's actually for me exactly proves with Hans Hacke, right, the 17 years in between, it proves why I so much argue for not to use this term anymore, because it shows that, obviously, without knowing the detail of the artwork, right, that there has been a succumbment, right, to right-wing discourse. I mean, someone who says, don't use Volk, it's problematic, and say, wir sind das Volk, has not listened to me. It has listened to Horst Seehofer or others. Who are we listening to when we formulate political agendas, right? For whom are we formulating political agendas? So in 1994, the German government back then passed one of the most important modifications of the German constitution, which was the right for asylum, became modified in 1994 and restricted. Drei. I was at the rally, I thought it was 94, but I'm sure memory fools oneself, 1993. That is, and it was justified, right? The move to restrict this right was justified by saying, oh, there's, all these, racist mob, I mean, not racist mob, there is all these anxiety about that the boat is full, and, there's all this violence happening, so let's restrict the right for asylum. Is this what we want? Also, in discourse? No, right? If Heimat was never, to me, an attractive term, I'm not gonna now sit and develop, nicer terms for it because, some parties demand that. I didn't speak of another Heimat. Just checking. You said I'm Greek. I didn't say that, I didn't say that. I didn't say. For me, Heimat is attractive notion. It's like the term vibe, right? This was the term for woman, for wives, right? Of course, you don't say vibe anymore to your partner. You call her, hopefully, partner or something else, but not vibe, right? It's not about, talking away the feeling for belonging, the need for community. It's not about that. It is just that you cannot rescue this term. The most plural that it has come, if I think back in, my decades of living and growing up in Germany, is like Roberto Blanco being, becoming Ehrenmitglied of the CSU by Französisch Haus. Roberto Blanco is an Afro-Cuban singer who was singing Heimat songs. German Heimat songs, and he was really liked for this performance, and he was an exoticized figure of, again, this expansion, right, of Heimat that can be possible. And he was by one of the most, reactive, racist political persona that we know in the past decades of German history, Franz Josef Strauss, declared to be the honorary member of the Christian Social Union, right? Show me another, make it attractive to me. I can't, I'm really happy and willing to think otherwise. But this is not how we have been witnessing the term Heimat to be employed. On TV, Heimat looks great. I had to watch these Heimat films together with my mother because she had some sort of liking for it. And, we were watching, together with our neighbors as a gesture of, living together. And our neighbor downstairs, she didn't have a TV. She was a widow who had lost her husband in the Second World War. She was pretty old, and my mother had really, feelings for her. And I had to call her to watch with her Heinz Rühmann filme and Heimat filme. And we really were watching those films together. And I think I also liked them. Everything was nice and happy. But that's not what Heimat is about, right? Phantom.
Okay. I tend to agree with Bilgin. But to make the devil's advocate, just to mention some people who used Heimat as a reference in another way, just for us to know for the record. So, as you might know, Ernst Bloch, No, we all know, but Ernst Bloch, in Prinzip, Vassilis told me not to quote it because everyone knows it, but still I think it's important, right, to say Ernst Bloch in Das Prinzip Hoffnung, he ends with Heimat, and I brought the quote with me. I didn't read it before because it was not a response. He says, die Wurzel der Geschichte ist der arbeitende, schaffende, die Gegebenheiten umbildende und überholende Mensch. Hat er sich... This is not nice. I hate it. Okay. Hat er sich erfasst und das Seine ohne Entäußerung und Entfremdung in realer Demokratie begründet, so entsteht in der Welt etwas, das allen in die Kindheit scheint und worin noch niemand war. Heimat. So, this is a very typical Frankfurt School, es ist schwäbisches Geblapsele, says my dear friend Vassilis. As I said before, I don't think the term is too safe, because he brings with it too much of an affirmation of a right-wing discourse. This is what you said, I think, is right. But Bloch, if you want, tries to do, and I think it's still interesting to think about it, since we are in a space where we can think and we don't have to decide. There is a Heimat without territory, right? There's a Heimat that is utopic and was never there, was never fulfilled, is an unfulfilled utopia. Mark Tekesides, who is a migration researcher and who will speak in my conference about Heimat and Nation, did a big project on Heimat Lieder. He called it Heimat Lieder, where he invited all kind of migrant musical traditions in Germany, inside Germany, and did a big festival and also 2 CDs where all these people, it was Iranian people, Greek, Turkish, etc., who were playing their Heimat Lieder. And this is what you asked Bilgin before. What about the Heimat, if you're a migrant and your Heimat is somewhere else? So Mark Tekesides referred to this term from the perspective of the migration. And he called it Heimat Lieder, and that's why I invited him in the conference to maybe tell us what he meant when he called this project Heimat Lieder. It was all not German music. It was all music that is produced in Germany, made by migrants, and has references all over the world, but not in Germany. But he called it Heimat Lieder. For me, maybe the more difficult question, because I think the Heimat question, I can say, okay, we don't use it. It's not our word. It's like wife, right? But for me, the more difficult question is the question of nation concerning post-colonial struggles of independence from coloniality. And I experienced this in Greece in the last years, where there was a struggle against rules and austerity measures, as well as the loss of sovereignty of Greece because of debt. A story that we know that is a déjà vu, as Bonaventure has said for Documenta, for a lot of countries in the world, where independency from the debt meant also national independency. And there also, if you look at indigenous struggles, for example, they have a whole other relationship to nationality, right, and to territoriality. And this is what I meant also with Rojava and Kurdistan. These fights there are fights that try to get independent from Turkey. What is interesting in the democratic confederalism of Kurdistan is that they want to get independent, but in an anti-Ataist way, right? In an anti-nationalist way. They think we get independent in a state-led stateless democracy. So in a democracy that is not representative, in a democracy that is post-representative in the sense that self-sovereignty, autonomy, where workers or citizen councils actually are in a decentralized situation, right? For me, so that's why for me Rojava is the most interesting example of having an independent struggle, but not concluding it in the nation state, but concluding it in a decentralized, self-sovereign, local confederation, right? So for me, the question of nation is a bit more difficult even than the question of Heimat, especially in Germany, because in Germany it's so clear, is so loaded with right-wing discourse that I would also not try to save it. So deheimatized.
Ich habe sie gesagt, du solltest nicht Bloch benutzen. Off the record, for the record, exactly. Sorry. Na gut, du hast mit Bloch angefangen. Ich muss mindestens eine Erklärung dafür liefern, warum ich ihn so verachte. In der Tat, Bloch versucht, eine Form der Heimatdefinition zu liefern, die eine Art kommender Erinnerungslandschaft ausmacht. Willst du übersetzen?
I told you not to cite Bloch, but I think I owe an explanation for why I have so much contempt for Bloch. And it begins with Bloch trying to define a home, giving a definition of home, which is a coming. Possible coming memory or commemoration.
Gut. Dass Bloch ein verhinderter Heiliger ist in der deutschen Sprache ist bekannt. Interessant ist, was die DDR damit gemacht hat, mit dieser Definition von Heimat. Nämlich mit einer deutsch, auf jeden Fall weiß definierten Vorstellung von multiplen Lokalitäten von Westdeutschland nicht nazifizierten Land gearbeitet hat. Da hat er gewirkt, da hat seine Definition funktioniert, aber es reicht jetzt mit der Philologie.
It's very interesting what the GDR did with the definition of home, of Bloch's definition of home, which is a German white multiple localities separated from the non-Nazified Western Germany. And this is where Bloch was successful in the former GDR, so the former Eastern Germany.
Das zu Bloch, was meine Antipathie betrifft. Es ist nicht wichtig. Heimat als Wort, schon als Wort ist das Wort Heimat, hat das Wort Heimat etwas Pneumatisches. Heimat. Ja, man spricht was aus. Es ist wichtig. Es hat was Pneumatisches. Und das ist Begehren. Das ist, womit alles, was pneumatisch ist, was vom Körper hinauskommt, erzeugt eine Nähe. Ist erstmal nicht schlecht. Ce n'est pas la nation. Das ist nicht pneumatisch, das ist aggressiv. Okay, es ist nicht wirklich, ich meine das ernst jetzt. Mit der Pneumatik meine ich das sehr ernst. Weil Heimat in der Tat kann oder hat historisch. Und ich bin sicher, bei vielen von uns, mich inklusiv gemeint, bestimmte Formen von heimatlichen Romantiken sprechen uns an, wenn wir genug ehrlich miteinander sind.
Maybe I can start. So the word Heimat has something very pneumatic. Heimat, pneumatic, it comes from the body and it carries desire because everything that comes from the body creates some sort of intimacy and proximity, closeness, which is very different to nation. Heimat, nation. So I am sure that all of us, me included, have some kind of association with home which carries this desire.
Gleichzeitig Heimat als Konzept und nicht als eine mögliche Erinnerungslandschaft à la Bloch, die wir niemals erreichen werden. Heimat als Konzept im deutschsprachigen Raum war immer verbunden mit einer völkischen Idee des Volkes. Und völkisch im Deutschen ist immer Reis, ist nichts anderes. Das heißt, eine bestimmte Vorstellung von Identifikation, von Volk, Bevölkerung und White Supremacy.
So when we talk about the concept of home as opposed to Bloch's idea, which is this memory landscape that we can never attain or achieve or reach, in the German language, the concept of home has always carried this idea which is ethnic, which is related to the people. And this idea is genuinely right, politically right.
Und was haben wir in Deutschland für mögliche andere Landschaften der Erinnerungskultur im Umgang mit Heimat? Wir haben die berühmte deutsch-jüdische Koexistenz. Das ist, womit wir arbeiten können oder könnten. Das ist Bestandteil der republikanischen Normalität als Erinnerungskultur.
So what are the kind of landscapes for commemoration or memory do we have in Germany for a commemoration culture which are associated with home but are different? And that's the idea of the German-Judaic coexistence and history. This is something we can and could work with.
Die deutsch-jüdische Koexistenz ist Bestandteil bundesrepublikanischer Staatsideologie, Staatsräson. Das merken wir permanent an dem Umgang mit antisemitischen Muslimen in Deutschland. Gleichzeitig ist ein Phantom. Es hat nie existiert. Aus der Perspektive der jüdischen Rückkehrer und Rückkehrerinnen in Deutschland, dieses Heimat, diese Heimat, dieses Heimat, finde ich gut, mehrere. Dieses Heimat war immer eine Unmöglichkeit. Es war eine Unmöglichkeit der Rückkehr, es war eine Unmöglichkeit des Verzeihens, es war eine Zumutung, eine permanente Zumutung im Umgang mit der permanenten angeblichen bundesrepublikanischen entnatifizierten Normalität. Sorry.
So this Judeo-German Christian idea is part of the state ideology in Germany. It's part of the state reason and understanding of Germany. But what we can see exemplified in the way Germany deals with anti-Semitic Muslims is that it's of course a phantom and it has never existed, which is also exemplified by the Jewish repatriates who tried to come back to Germany to some home, but obviously this was always an impossibility and even a provocation.
Also was haben wir für Modelle in Deutschland? Im deutschsprachigen Raum, nicht nur in Deutschland, vielleicht auch in Europa, aber bleiben wir in Deutschland. Was haben wir für Modelle für mögliche neue Zukünfte, die eine Art Zuhause, wie er das definiert hat, der Master, nämlich sein Sohn. Heimat ist, das ist Bekenntnis zu einer Person, zu einer Geschichte, zu einer Nation, zu einer Verantwortung für die Effekte unserer Handlungen. Was haben wir für Modelle? Das deutsch-jüdische Modell ist Staatsdoktrin. Es ist kein funktionierendes Modell. Es erzeugt eine Legalität für die Mehrheitsbevölkerung und eine Vergangenheitsbewältigungslegalität und eine absolute Distanz gegenüber den Goyems seitens der jüdischen Communities. Wir haben nicht bessere Modelle in Deutschland diesbezüglich. Und darin besteht für mich, darin besteht für mich eine Chance, weil wir keine besseren Modelle haben und weil wir eine besondere Geschichte haben, und damit meine ich uns alle, nicht nur Migranten und Nicht-Migranten, zu der Singularität der Geschichte dieses Landes haben wir nur eine Möglichkeit, nämlich radikal andere Zukünfte, alternativ und radikal anders als die Heimatsnarrative zu entwickeln. Und ich glaube, dafür würde ich arbeiten. Mit euch, mit dir, mit dir.
So what other models do we have in Germany that could create possible new futures, like the one that the master did, for example, by defining home in his son? This idea to define home in a person, in a narration, in the effect of our actions and deeds would be a very beautiful one. But the state doctrine that we have in Germany of this Judeo-Christian identity does not work, because it has so far only provided legality for the majority population, but absolute distance for the Goy, for everyone who does not belong. So we do not have better models, which I see as a chance, and the chance lies therein that we all have a special history, not just migrants in this country, but everyone with the singularity of the story of this country in Germany. So I propose to radically distance from the home narratives that do exist in Germany and find other new forms that could provide new futures.
Ein Bild dafür haben wir heute gesehen. Die Art und Weise, wie die Überlebenden der Pogrome unsere Kanzlerin mitgezogen hat. Mit ihrer Hand. Das ist eine großartige, dehierarchisierende Form von Intimität. Da können wir nicht Erinnerungslandschaften, sondern Möglichkeitslandschaften, die einen Namen wie einen Sohn oder eine Tochter oder eine wirkliche Zukunft machen.
One example for such a new model we've seen in the picture today of this survivor of the arson attack. This movement of her hands taking the chancellor, because this is an image of a possible new future instead of a commemoration, and this is a model that might work.
Just on 2 points. First of all, and they're actually connected, right? I think the history of the, advertised Judeo-Christian, past and cultural heritage is an important one, and it actually tells us quite a bit about the notion of Heimat, because up until the 1920s, and actually up until the Holocaust itself, you have also Jewish authors writing novels about Heimat, about the German Heimat. Huh? So the Jewish Germans who have been living for 1,600 years, right, in these territories, Heimats, right, have been very part and parcel also producing, in part of these poems and the, novels that fabricated also this idea of Heimat. But of course, this ends, right? It ends very strictly and abruptly. And I would say, you talked about Ernst Bloch, but I think the important reference here is Adorno, of course, Adorno and Horkheimer, who, with their enlightenment of dialectics of enlightenment, in a way, have a very serious engagement with the notion of Heimat. Who does Heimat belong to? To the Nazis, right? Or can it be done more with it? I mean, the dialectics of enlightenment is an engagement with that. And Adorno comes back from his exile, and when he develops the pedagogical, advices on how to re-educate, Germany, he actually says that the countryside is one of the most important places where this kind of, re-education has happened, because it's the countryside with these notions of Heimat that need to be, where these kind of programs need to develop. They didn't, right? And what has left from that, what I want to bring back the focus on, is also the institutional aspects of the Heimat discourse. That the reason why the notion of Heimat is still so prevalent is because there are Heimatvertriebene Vereine, right? There are, well, I have to, we had a small conversation with Margarita before that. I don't really, that's maybe one thing I don't really, where I would relativize that. I don't think the Heimat Ministerium is that what we should make out of it in that regard. To me, I mean, first of all, it's not a Heimat Ministerium, it's called it's a Minister for Interior, Construction and Heimat. Heimat is a resort. And if you read the tasks that is accorded to the resort Heimat, right, you can read that this is about, quote unquote, reducing regional disparities. If this would be in Africa, they would call this a ministry for development, right? There is a ministry for development, but that deals with Africa and Latin America. So when it's Germany, it's the ministry, that's the resort Heimat. It's to reduce the economical structural disparities that exist between different lenders. Right? And Bavaria is actually indeed the model for that, because Bavaria had introduced such a ministry and, balanced out some of the regional disparities that exist there, right? And so this is how that came with that. So I think this is what I mean when I say we should not really distract. I mean, let's focus on that, on those notions, right? Where it is about power and greed. Interestingly, having development as part in this kind of regional development as part of the Minister Interior, it means that a lot of the finances and much more are going to be bundled there. So yesterday it was announced that the EU is going to pay Germany 4.5 billion as some sort of a compensation for taking up the refugees for each refugee in 2015. So for each refugee, 2,800 euro is going to be paid back to Germany, right? These funds are going to be channeled, obviously, into this ministry. So thanks to the refugees, there will be better internet in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and other places. We could also look at this in this way as a ministry of development. Yeah.
Well, we are running out of time, but we will take at least one question from the audience. The Bilgin, with all due respect as to what is written in the, what the Heimat should be, in the very first interview Seehofer gave about, and they asked him very clear questions, what do you consider the Heimat Ministerium to be? And he gave answers to that. Yes. And they're very clear. And it's not about a development ministry or something. He was very clear about that. Very clear. So we have to be critical about these things, because there is something written on the papers which is supposed to be the constructed, and there is something that the real meaning of it. And he said that actually quite clearly what his imagination of the Heimat Ministerium is. And it is what we are talking about, is his construction of the fact that Islam doesn't belong to Germany and so on and so forth, of the creation of these big asylum centers. And so these are his very clear definitions. So I wouldn't want to water that down with some idea of some development ministry. It's not the case, so we should be clear about that. The second point we have to put into consideration is, I come consciously with this idea of the phantom limb. The phantom limb. Which is in the concept, the invitation, and I think really the discussion is not about whether we should use Heimat or not use Heimat. It is about what we are encountering at the moment, the discourses we are encountering at the moment. And the question is, what happens to this, as Arjun put it, an entirely imagined agency? What do we do with that? If this is a fiction, if this is an imagination, if this is something that has been put in there, how do we deal with it? How do we negotiate that space that is created? Which is something I'm interested in, especially in the context of an art space. How do we negotiate that, those encounters? So let's get at least one question from the audience, so that, because we're really running late. Should we collect? Then yes. And yes.
Hi. Okay. Okay, my question. My question is the following. So you all talked about Heimat, rightfully also as a discursively dangerous term. But at the same time, how I experience it in the German discourse is that Heimat also gets ridiculed. So there's this incidence of Seehofer got this, and everyone made jokes about it. So how do you deal with that?
So, I don't know if it works, yeah. Yeah, my question was different. So I feel like we've kind of identified from multiple perspectives, you know, the construction of the other, how the construction of race meets the, you know, birth of the nation, and how nationalism, you know, relates differently from the concept of Heimat. But my question is, especially in this process of, you know, de-Heimatization, is what type of methods and also what new type of political ideas, you know, do we actually want to propose? Because I feel that's also, you know, where, you know, extremely far-right and populistic movements, you know, gain power, because they simplify very simple concepts of belonging. There's something very beautiful that Bell Hooks speaks about how can you construct a new sense of belonging, one that embraces all of the conditions of the world. One that actually goes beyond also the human as a species. And I feel maybe it is really also time to sort of move the attention from, you know, the understanding of the problem to what type of new imaginations, if we want to use that word, do we actually want to, you know, put forward and distribute and present also in political agendas, because it is really time to, you know, engage with political agendas.
One more question. I'm also trying to make it short. So there were a couple of anecdotes shared in the panel, and I think I want to share one too, which basically has to do with somehow maybe in a way like the state performing its own stateness or stating, in a sense that, of course, the state makes statements, but also, you know, creates states of being for people. And so my observation today has to do with that, in the sense that I went to Leipzig today, where a new exhibition is being in the making, is being put up, which is an exhibition that tries to create links between Congolese artists and artists in Leipzig, and funded by the KSB, so indirectly by the German state. And a lot of the artists that were invited all got their visas refused from the German state. So the German state funds a project and then refuses the participants to take part in this project, which to me doesn't make much sense. So there's that, and then also at the same time we find ourselves in this space, you know, which also the funding is also coming from the German state. So my question is, what are we performing here?
Wow, crazy how much information has come into my brain. I can't process everything, but the one thing I think was missing, for me at least personally, was somebody sitting in front of there and fervently arguing for Heimat. And because I love the term, I love the feelings that it invokes, and I think millions of people have very positive associations with that. And first of all, I think that should not be ignored, and secondly, I mean, what's the alternative, right? I mean, just because you have a bad breakup, you don't want to ban love, or just because, you know, you had a bad dish, you don't want to ban. So my question would be, what is the alternative for people like me who happen to like the word?
Okay, so let's do maybe each of you would tackle one question in a very short way, then we move on to Njamy Sitson, because that's also a very important part of the evening. You know, we have to get into the musical space of maybe heimatizing or deheimatizing, you know. So, please.
I think in the past 200, 300 years, there have been a couple of terms that have been invoking quite a bit of emotional resonance, but then have been dropped. Colonization is one like that. You know, no one had a problem with colonies in, from 1884 to 1920 and even further beyond, and probably even now some too. It is possible to get rid of some political concepts who are so violent and exclusive, right, that they get replaced by other terms. Again, I want to underline that this is really a critique of the use of Heimat, this particular Heimat. It's not about belonging and it's not about attachment, right? I just want to highlight that. To your question about what kind of political ideas there could be, I think exactly the space where you went with bell hooks. I mean, I could add other feminist, post-colonial theorists, right? Thinking about what does actually solidarity mean in these forms, affective solidarity. Can we actually, act together and do unlikely alliances with people who we maybe even not even resonate, etc. So there's a lot of debate about that too, right? So, but I took it serious that we can today just critique and not have to offer the thing. Just to your point, that relates also to Bonaventure's intervention. The German Foreign Ministry has been for years funding activities in Namibia with the German settlers so that they could flourish German culture and Heimat. There's like the Swakopmund Männerchor and other places that have been funded with the German Foreign Ministry. So I'm quite fine with the idea that today with their money we can also deheimatize belonging, if that's in any way possible. But it's an important point. I don't want to
just an anecdote for the discussion before. There is a discussion inside the Heimatministerium of how to translate the Heimatministerium. And there is friends of mine who happen to work not in the Heimatministerium but as a consultant who try to establish the word of community in there. You talked about development, to say, what about talking about community? What about talking about country versus, decentralized way of politics, of division, of resources, etc. And if this is then translated into a community ministerium, then it is really interesting. But I think actually that the reason why it is called Heimatministerium is a clear shift to the right from the CSU. The CSU needs to close the eyes to its right extreme wing voters and wants to hug them in order for them not to go over to the Alternative for Germany. So I think actually it is not such an innocent move to being a development ministry, but it's actually you try to deconstruct it, but I think it's a clear shift to the right, and I think, it might materialize in a development ministry, but the signal it sends out is that we talk about Heimat again, yes. And that Heimat is the National Interior Ministry, and that nation and Heimat are more near than we might remember. So that is why I would not want to. I have to be quick. About new imaginations, I think new imaginations are there. They're everywhere. We're talking about it all these years. For some reason, we need them to be effective to affects. And I think the EU, as you said before, and I was super relieved that you criticized the EU as an alternative to nation, etc., and Europe as an alternative of bringing us together, etc., is really bullshit. And I think this is what people on the right also understand, and this is why they get angry, because fake news did not start with Trump, fake news did not start with the AfD, fake news has been with us all the time through, and there is a reason why people, you know, get upset. So I have to close here.
Vassilis, just very briefly, please, so we go on to the next phase. Very briefly.
Also ich kann sehr viel anfangen mit dem, was du gesagt hast. In der Tat, es gibt ein paar Orte in diesem Kontinent, die ich als meine Heimat bezeichnen könnte. Eins davon ist Hamburg, beziehungsweise Harburg, nicht Hamburg. Und noch ein paar andere. Nicht viele. Ich kann absolut was damit anfangen. Das ist kein Thema. Vom Feeling her ist da. Die Frage ist nur, okay, es gibt Leute in der Tat in diesem Kontinent, die die Möglichkeit haben, solche affektive Bezüge zu nicht problematischen Kontext dessen, was wir Heimat bezeichnen könnten. Es ist ein Brunnen, es ist der Ort, wo wir zum ersten Mal geküsst haben, gekifft haben. Schöne Sachen eigentlich, okay. Okay, ja klar. Dankeschön. Okay, selbstverständlich, das gehört auch zu dieser Vorstellung von Heimat. Aber interessanterweise, ich habe das Gefühl, solange es in diesem Land Leute gibt, und wir sind 1/4 dieses Landes, solange es diese Leute in diesem Land gibt, die, obwohl diese Gefühle haben, zum ersten Mal küssen, kiffen, Brunnen, mein erstes Bier, also wirklich schönes, das erste Mal, wo ich mit dem Fahrrad hingefahren bin und umgefallen bin und geholfen wurde und mein erstes Kiosk, wo ich zum ersten Mal mein Beefy genommen habe, also total schöne Sachen, okay, das ist nicht, okay, aber solange es 1/4 der Wohnbevölkerung in diesem Land, obwohl sie wahrscheinlich auch, und ich bin fest davon überzeugt, dass wir die gleichen Gefühle dazu haben, daran gehindert werden, indem sie an einer Filiale, sorry, ich muss zurückkommen, damit konfrontiert werden, dass dort die Heimat ist, indem Mann oder Frau aussprechen will, was man sagen will, dann finde ich, wir haben ein Problem. Und damit müssen wir gehen, damit wir vielleicht diese Formen von Feeling zu Orten, Lokalitäten, Identitäten, zum Ort und zu Gemeinschaften, damit wir sie auch tatsächlich detraumatisieren. Aber solange sowas passiert, und ich befürchte, es ist zunehmend, wir brauchen etwas mehr als Liebe für something. Vielleicht brauchen wir sogar, ich weiß nicht, was wir brauchen. Troubles.
Yeah. Okay.
Ich glaube, wir brauchen Troubles.
Okay, danke schön. So, I mean, just a very fast translation, and then we have to really move to the next level. Really,
Fast translation.
Is.
Okay, I can make a lot of sense of what you said, of all these feelings of attachment and belonging, and I do have my locations and places, and I'm sure there are a lot of people in this continent who do have this, which are personal memories, the first fountain, the first kiff, the first joint we smoked, and the first beer. But as long as we, meaning the migrants in this country, who make up 1/4 of the population, are excluded, although this 1/4 of the population might have the same kind of feelings and affectations, but they are excluded from this term, we do have a problem. And as long as we cannot de-traumatize these feelings to certain locations, we need more than love.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So, it's not over yet. We're doing a slight transition to the next phase and the final phase of the evening, which is Njamy Sitson. In 1972, the legendary Hugh Masekela did an album, and one song on it was called home is where the music is. So I think that is where we should conclude. Home is where the music is. So Njamy, Sitson, you're very much welcome to the stage. Thank you.
mamombe tamon chulamo bim khum de senila alu buta lilamo batsun manda juk bum bam ve cham nem ma humombe bo 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 ne la mansela ngom kalo na baba tola tunando na baba tuba tuba bubi Wotalambi yombe Kuntong mula mombe Ngoma kalo Baglo bulu la 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 Nengoma kalo Chumbaga bomentin la mo Ngubushendala Wir werden gemeinsam singen im Kreis der Gemeinschaft. Hobo, hobo, zusammen. Hobo, hobo. Bitte. Wollen wir gemeinsam singen? Hobo, hobo, hobo. Zu leise, bitte. Aha. Hobo, hobo, mama bo. Tamanjula, hobo, hobo, oh, sopra. Hobo, 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 tamanjula, bibu lango, hobo, tamanjula, hobo, tabangachu, hobo, hobo. Merci. Monze, der Weg nach innen. Chup macrio ne mamo mama. Chup macrio shunung walambo. Takabanya bolambo be. Jumakadio ne mamombi. Jumakadio shimvung wai lambo. Uten quade do de obi. Babu aten song verbe ondi babu. Jumakadio ne mamombi. Bashin cha ya jamo. Taka banya bola. Bolo bosi kununjo. Uten quade do de hombi babu aken song do de hombi. Makombe. Sangolo windy, 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 sangolo windy. Sangolo windy, 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 sangolo windy. Sangolo windy, 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 ya baba sangolo windy, sangolo windy, sangolo windy. Sangolo windy, sangolo windy, sangolo windy, sangolo windy,
Rumba hila dia.
Sangolo windy, sangolo windy, sangolo windy, sangolo windy, sangolo windy, sangolo windy. Sangolo windy, 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 sangolo windy. Sigedoro bangambo bendoro senilamo sangolo
Vater, du bist gegangen. 10 Jahre. Dieses Lied ist für dich. Eine Widmung. Die Verstorbenen sind nicht verstorben. Die sind hier und jetzt. Hic et nunc. Wind, Licht, Stille. Ich trage dich in meinem Herzen. Mit tiefer Dankbarkeit. Kanye Kuribaso. Taningo babamu Sangolo Du kommst zurück in Form eines Vogels und fliegt über die Dörfer und bringt die Geschenke zu Kindern. Du tröstest alle Menschen. Babadia Bako Men vöge, men som kan dans wanke, maje. Sangolo wendi, silo dulamo, baktensiang ulamo bi. Danke. Sanga muombe Yella buabu Anabuta lilamo Malogun shenamo Lembo baba Baba isumalango Majoda ikangambolo me ba fo Baba Shinamobi Mama Kalsocha, Katsangila Wombi, no Sangamobi, no Tangama Sango Bababu, Siangulabi, Esumabu. Abu Badu, Badulada, Bong 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 Bong. Dieses Lied ist eine Widmung. Ich habe dieses Lied Schaman aus Südafrika. Der heißt Credo Mutmur. Masakiniye tondo yelele Antio panzole Sia bonga baba Sia bonga sangoma Sia bonga baba Sia bonga sangoma oh 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 yeah uyelele mu mama sangie ya mafanzi yelelele Sia bonga baba Sia bonga sangoma Sia bonga baba Sia bonga sangoma Jumbande Antio Masakindie dondo yelele Antio banzole Sia bonga baba Sia bonga sangoma Sia bonga baba Sia bonga sangoma Yeba Uyelele mugo na muoni nahi Roli shasha mugo Kosisi keleli Afrika Yapa fanzi yelele Sia bonga baba Sia bonga sangoma Sia bonga baba Credo modua Danke
So, thank you very much once more. Thanks for staying on onto these unholy hours of the night. Come back on the 8th of June, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. We will do it even more intensively. So we'll have the other invocations, the other reflections. On the 8th, we start at 4 p.m., on the 9th at 4 p.m. as well, and on the 10th at 1 p.m. And until midnight, what? Exactly, we have the programs in the handout. Don't forget to take them with you. And we'll have a couple of brilliant intellectuals, artists, performances, poets, and we commissioned a new duo called the Hostipitality Duo, which is made up of the legendary Jacques Cousil and Mark Gilmore. And we are also happy to announce that after that we will initiate the new Savvy Records, the new label in town. So we're working towards that. So thank you so much, and have a good night. And thanks to all the wonderful Savvy people that make these things happen. Elena, Agudio, the wonderful Cornelia, who's been working tirelessly on this, many others, you know. I cannot name 26 people now, but you know, you're all in. Bennett, turn on the microphone, man. Yeah. Yes. For your extreme generosity, you know, and you know, we are known. Turn on the microphone. It should be on the records. We're happy about that, you know, and for always being present and making that happen more or less smoothly. Thank you so much. Guys, go to bed or go to some party somewhere, but go sleep.